The story begins with slowly opening eyes that dimly see what is happening. There's a guy in front of him saying something. The person on whose behalf the story is being narrated does not understand what this guy is talking about. His words close up again and he can't see anything anymore. Next we see a guy with red hair, who is sitting with his back to the wall. He scratches the back of his head and groans in pain, saying that his brain is bad. He removes his hand, sniffs and feels the stench. He assumes that something has gone stale. Next, he wonders what kind of place it is where he woke up, and why he is on the roof at all. He gets up and walks to the end of the building and looks down. He sees a lot of people from below and does not understand why they crowded together. He takes a closer look and realizes that something is wrong. He is startled abruptly, because he understands that these are no longer people, but zombies. He screams from ugly faces with red eyes and a lifeless expression. He abruptly steps back from fright. He tries to think about what is going on here at all, because he was in the normal world only a second ago. A lot of thoughts are spinning in his head. He can't think clearly. He searches his pockets in order to find his phone to go online and see what's going on. Of course, he doesn't find it, but he takes peanuts out of his pocket. He is surprised, because he remembers how he bought a bag of peanuts in the supermarket earlier. He sits down on the ground and realizes that it's over, because all he has is a bag of peanuts. He is sure that he will definitely die. Here he will gnaw nuts and immediately go to the next world. He begins to remember his life and says that he didn't even have a girlfriend, and he's already dying. Abruptly, the door behind him opens and a girl with blue hair gathered in a ponytail comes in. She herself is covered in wounds and abrasions. The hidden guy is watching her. He still thinks that he hasn't even had a girlfriend yet, and he's already dying. Well, that's it, he's finished. Suddenly, the girl pierces an unknown shell with a knife and removes the knife, after which liquid pours out of this shell. This is water. She washes herself with it, rubbing her neck, legs. The guy watches her, blushes and does not understand how a zombie can be so charming. He washes his face and removes his hands. She has long eyelashes and the same big blue eyes. The guy is still looking at her and thinking how beautiful and alive she is. Suddenly, he steps on a small stone, which makes a sound. The girl immediately reacts, turns around and walks towards him with such speed. He doesn't even have time to say hello to her, as she charges him in the face with her fist. He coughs from the blow. He is ordered not to move. She pulls out a gun and points it at his forehead. He immediately begs him to spare him and not to kill him. The girl is surprised and asks who he is. He blushes and stammers because he is intoxicated by her beauty. He still doesn't answer. Suddenly, some bird comes out of some backpack with a lock and asks if the enemy has invaded their territory. He turns his head and still asks if such a strong opponent is really. Do they think that this is enough to scare him? The bird? He will not retreat and goes into combat readiness. The girl grits her teeth from understanding his uncertainty and awkwardness. She slaps him in the face again, calling him bad. She puts a gun to his pelvis and says that she will make mincemeat out of him. He gets scared and shouts that it is not necessary and begs for mercy on his life. Suddenly, a huge zombie comes out behind them, looking like a titan with disproportionate body parts. He attacks the girl directly. She manages to get away from the blow, so that the monster's huge fist falls on the ground between the guy's legs. From such a blow, the floor cracks and breaks into small pieces. The guy from fright at first just sits, not moving. Then he realizes that a little more and he would have died. The monster's hand is still on the ground between the guy's legs. He gets mad and angry, says to the monster, "Is she really not normal at all? Well, if she was staring, then why beat him up?" The monster begins to growl, but one of his eyes is damaged after a blow from the girl. The monster begins to growl even more. He walks away from the guy and turns towards the girl, who continuously fires at him with 2 pistols. The zombie punches her again. She dodges and reflects that the skull of this mutant is too thick, and bullets cannot penetrate it. However, she shot him in the eye, and now he's just waving his claws. The monster continues to attack her in every possible way. The girl professionally dodges, while having time to think that the roof is limited in size, and there are not so many places to hide, and if he continues to smash like that, he will most likely attract other low-level zombies. The upper part of the body is huge, which leads to a lack of support for the lower part of the body, and the right leg, it seems, was broken before birth. She makes such conclusions because the mutant does not move very fast. The mutant continues to scream and growl. The girl pulls out a bandsaw with very sharp teeth, which was developed specifically for the battle against giant zombies. The mutant attacks her with a swing of his arm and with an oblique gait. A guy with red hair yells at her to be careful. Right at the last moment, he runs away from the blow, while managing to cut the monster's leg with this saw. In an instant, she does this to all his limbs with a bandsaw. The monster is defeated. The girl picks up a crystal and says that the nucleolus is of good quality this time. The guy, trembling with fear, just looks at her in silence. The girl looks at herself and the dirty spots on her leg and says that, after all, she just washed, and here is this dirt again. She approaches the guy, who is still trembling with fear, and asks what kind of a jerk he is, and what kind of camp he is from. He does not answer. After silence, the girl declares that she is actually talking to him. He, in turn, runs away from reality, saying what a realistic dream, that's why there were so many horrors to watch. So he'll sleep it off and everything will be like before again. He nibbles these peanuts in a panic. He has a hysterical laugh. He says that the taste of peanuts is just as persistent even in the world of dreams. The girl takes this pack of peanuts from him. She asks him with burning eyes and with great appetite who he is, and where he got valuable longevity nuts from. The guy is surprised and asks if she also likes peanuts. The girl removes her smile and reminds him with a bandsaw at his neck that she actually asked a question about which camp he was from and where he got such rare food. The cold touch of the knife and the burning pain he felt when he was cut made Qin Shuang finally realize that all this was real. He repeats the word no several times and asks the girl to remove the blade from his neck. He introduces himself, says that his name is Qin Shuang, and that he is just an ordinary handsome man, and peanuts are a snack that he carries with him for a snack. He bought it at the Vandame's supermarket. Suddenly some bullets flew in their direction, one of which wounded the girl in the leg. Qin Shuang is frightened by every movement. They run and hide behind the fence. Qin Shuang had already laid down on the ground, covering his head with his hands. He asks the girl how she is, because she has a bullet in her leg. The girl's leg turns blue, the wound increases and the veins on her leg begin to increase. She thinks why mutants got here. It turns out that that's it, hyenas ran in. Meanwhile, the people who let people in are standing in a bunch on the other side. One with a gun with a smile informs the others that after all, he said she was good, so he lured the zombies to her and let her take care of the zombies for them. Another person standing next to him calls him the boss and says that he is so smart, because he was able to get a zombie core without using a single soldier. The other is worried and asks the boss, and this girl after a bullet in her leg will not come after them to take revenge. The boss with the scar on his eye tells him not to worry, because there was corpse poison in the first bullet he fired. Now her death will not take long to wait. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang and the girl see how her leg just grows in size. The girl realizes that there was corpse poison in the bullet and says that despite the fact that she has evolved, the virus of an ordinary zombie does not spread to her. But this one is a new type of R virus that is more powerful than those weak infections. She turns to Qin Shuang and says that it looks like she won't survive this time. She informs that the people who shot them were from 17 Lager, and they need the fruit from the zombie she just laid, and they will kill them both if they catch them. Qin Shuang, in a stupor, asks what they should do then. The girl tells him that she can detain them so that he can escape. He immediately asks what about her then. She replies that there is a corpse poison in her, and only penicillin can neutralize it. She cannot leave because she quickly turns into a zombie, and then Qin Shuang will definitely not survive. She already feels even worse. She continues to persuade him that she can help him escape, but she also sets him a condition, asks him for a favor. She asks him to go and tell her sister to run. Without her protection, her sister will be caught by scumbags from Camp 17, and she will have something worse than death. But then she bows her head in doubt and hopes that maybe there is still a chance. He immediately asks if it really only needs penicillin to cure her. She gets angry and asks if he even knows what this only penicillin means. Does he imagine how difficult it is to get something like penicillin, because it is the rarest thing in the world? He asks again, is it really the rarest? The girl lets the smoke down and says she will shoot to distract them, and when the smoke gets thick, he will be able to escape through the door on the roof. She gives him a piece of paper and says that her sister is here. She asks him to remember so that he will definitely tell her what she asked him. She starts shooting through the smoke and shouts to Qin Shuang to run now. He tries to escape in a panic. In the process of escaping, Qin Shuang thinks that she just saved his life. How can he just leave her and run away? He thinks about penicillin. He just needs to go back to his world, because there he is in any pharmacy. He wants to go back. Suddenly, a system opens in front of him, a window with a screen that informs Qin Shuang that the system is turned on and asks if she should use the transfer. Qin Shuang does not understand what other transfer is in question. Is it really back to his world? The system responds to him that it is. The girl behind him screams, is he rooted there or something? Let him move more sharply. Qin Shuang asks if he can return from his world back here. The system responds that everything is correct. He says he wants to return to his world right now. The system announces the start of the move. A moment later he wakes up in the hospital. A pleasant breeze blows from the window. Someone is quarreling on the street. One asks the other, "He bought a license." The other asks him to drive away. In the corridor, the doctor asks an elderly man how his legs are. He replies that they are much better. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang is running along this corridor with everyone, repeating aloud again and again about penicillin. Where is he? In another world, the girl was already tired. She stopped firing. He repeats his request without strength and emotion. Be sure to pass it to his sister. Those guys from 17 Lager are talking. The boss says that since the shots have stopped, the girl is already exhausted. He calls everyone else to follow him, saying that it's time to reap the fruits of the battle. In the real world, Qin Shuang is scolded by a nurse, telling him not to run through the corridors. This nurse was carrying some pills in cones. He sees it, puts everything under his t-shirt and runs away. The nurse does not understand anything and only looks back at his trail. Qin Shuang repeats again and again about carrying pills under his t-shirt. The girl is sitting in another world. Her whole body is covered with bright veins. She looks lifelessly at one point. Qin Shuang pokes her on the cheek, asking if she is still dead. She looks at him after the action. He exhales and speaks like a stone from his shoulders. She starts yelling at him, asking if he's okay with his brain, why he came back at all. Qin Huang takes out a pill bottle and shows it to the girl and informs her that he brought penicillin. She asks in a stupor where he got it from. He calmly and with a smile replies that he just went. Qin Huang asks her not to ask questions and claims that this is the real penicillin. He pours one pill into his palm, hands it to her and says that she will not die, and they will get out of here together and alive. He puts a pill in the girl's mouth with a request to take a sip. At first she just sits with her mouth closed, and then finally opens and swallows. Qin Shuang asks her, well, how does she feel, if she feels better? After a while, she exclaims that the tumor has disappeared and the poison has also disappeared. She examines her leg, which has almost completely recovered. She says she can't believe how she managed to suppress the poison in such a short time. She asks him, after bandaging her leg and putting on a shoe, what kind of penicillin it is. Suddenly the guys from Camp 17 come in. The boss orders others to find her for him. He still hopes that maybe he will be lucky to have fun if she is still alive. Suddenly, the girl raises her voice with a question. They are looking for her there. She stands proudly and confidently with a bandsaw in her hand. The guys are scared. She says that it's good, because she was just going to look for them, and they came by themselves. The boss of 17 Lager in complete shock asks how this is even possible, how she is still alive. The men chose that it was better for them to run. One begs for mercy, says that it is not necessary. The other asks for help. Meanwhile, Qin Shuang, who hears all this, is surprised by her and says that it looks like she obviously won't need help. He sees a notebook on the table, picks it up and assumes that it is a personal diary, and even if it is, he wonders what kind of normal person will keep it. He reads the first page and says that an adequate one will not write about it. It said that on July 21, 2080, it was a sunny day. A plump young woman from the house opposite went outside again to hang up her clothes to dry. From time to time she goes out to pick up dried clothes, a trifle, but it's nice. In the performance, a man admires what kind of figure she has. Then it was written that on July 22, 2080, on a day with variable clouds, a new manager was transferred to the company, who was accidentally put next to him. And she must be training a lot, because she's just space. Maybe he doesn't like the woman from the house opposite so much. Also in the diary there is information that there are rumors about an outbreak of the R virus in a neighboring province. He hopes that it will not spread to his area, but he also notices that the new girl just makes him stop being afraid. Then there is a picture of him hiding under the table and seeing his feet and heels. On the skin of the legs of this woman there are large and bright veins with spots on large areas. Then he sees her entire torso, and that it is also completely covered with these spots and veins. He is trembling with fear, but he does not take his eyes off her. Then he fully sees the face of his manager, which is again lifeless and directed to nowhere. The company was quarantined. He was even confined to 4 walls and was not allowed to leave. On July 24, 2080, the R virus infected most of the city. Residents were left with a minimum of provisions. Calls to responsible people remain unanswered. If this goes on, he may starve to death. On July 25, 2080, no matter what, he decided to crack the lock and go out. He needed to go outside and get some food himself. He opens the door and goes outside. Everything is empty. Only garbage and fallen leaves from trees are lying on the roads. He went to the supermarket, where everyone is fighting for food, to the pharmacy, where chaos is happening. Everyone went crazy from vandalism and looting, grabbing everything they could. After he managed to heat up some food and medicine, on the way back he saw infected people biting people. Of course, from such a sight, he immediately takes off his feet. On August 3, 2080, on a rainy day, he writes that the TV signal suddenly disappeared 2 days ago, and the host on the last screen told them that help might not come and that they should try to help themselves, and said something about humanity not dying out and there is always hope. The author scoffs at such news. On August 17th, he ran out of all the food. But if he leaves this room, he will most likely be eaten alive by hordes of infected people outside. It must be painful. The last few days he has been filling his stomach with tap water. He does not know how long he will live. He misses so much by manager by. Suddenly he hears requests not to approach and questions what he wants from her. He looks up and realizes that this is the same woman from the opposite house, and if she makes noise, she will attract infected people here. He watches a fight where a man stabs her with a knife. He abruptly gets up from his seat and realizes that she was stabbed by her own husband. After he sees her husband bending over her and doing something near her, he doesn't understand what exactly. On August 19th, after 4 days without food, he was really dying. When he was completely desperate, someone knocked on his door. This someone asked if there was penicillin inside. He paid attention to it, barely raising his head. This man traded a huge pile of food for his penicillin. Penicillin really worked better than genetic antibiotics. It was hard to even believe that antibiotics didn't work. But some kind of penicillin is the strongest medicine. He eats bread, rolls, and chips with great appetite. The medicine he grabbed that day saved him, and he is still alive. When he was on the balcony on August 21st, he found a man downstairs who was eating something on the street, and he could not understand how horses can tolerate it at all. Is it really edible? This man ate the kernels after the zombies. On August 30th, all the penicillin hidden in his closet was stolen from him. He gets angry, calls them cursed animals, because it was his only hope to survive. On September 1st, he decided to leave this cage-like house. Even if the world outside is full of infected people, he no longer wants to starve to death in his room like a fool. He might be lucky to find food while he still has the strength, but if he doesn't, he'll just do what that guy did the other day. He meets a zombie with a hanging eyeball along the way. He is alert, trembling, but he is not going to run. He holds a knife in his hands and says that now either he will eat it or vice versa. This is the end of the diary entries. Qin Shuang flips through and does not understand. Is there really no more? He wonders if he has never come back, if he has died after all. He thinks that, not paying attention to it yet, the diary probably gave him an idea of what was happening in this world. People infected with the R virus turn into zombies that feed on people. Judging by the current situation with food shortages paralyzing cities, he believes that most people are already infected. And the most important thing in this dying world. He looks at his pockets, sees penicillin, and realizes that these drugs are the most important in this world. Penicillin is more expensive than a gem in this world, but it's what so many people are asking for, and what he can buy at the click of a finger in his world, which means, abruptly someone shouts to him that he is caught. The boss presses a gun to his temple and says that, so he had a can of penicillin, and he was thinking why this girl survived. The boss made Qin Shuang kneel down and give him all the medicines. He still holds the gun right in front of him. He takes the cone and is surprised and happy that it is also whole. If he gives the whole bottle to the organization, he will be promoted 3 steps up, and Qin Shuang will go 3 steps down to hell. The panicked man tells him to wait and informs him that he has more. A girl comes and asks not to shoot. The boss orders the girl to stand where she is or else he will kill Qin Shuang. The girl also pulls out a gun and says that if he shoots, she will smear his brain on the wall in the next second. She tells him to let Qin Shuang go, and then she will let him live. She also advises him to listen better to the sounds outside, because the loud noise and the smell of blood after the armed fight attracted a large group of zombies. If he let him go right now, he would have time to escape from here. If they delayed, then all 3 of them would die here. The boss clicks, sees dead people from Camp 17. The girl tells him that he has had enough for today and asks him to let him in. The boss addresses her as Xiao Yunlan, and says that she has killed so many of his brothers that she will not let her go just like that. The boss pushes Qin Shuang towards her, and he uses the rope and flies away. At the same time, he manages to tell her that the next time they meet, he will chop her into pieces and feed her to zombies to avenge his brothers. Gently falling on Xiao Yunlan, Qin Shuang is just enjoying what happened. The girl on nerves tells him whether she needs to detach him from himself or whether he will dump himself. A dark night is coming, clouds are in the sky, the stars are barely visible. Zombies are roaming the streets in a crowd. Xiao Yunlan and Qin Shuang look at the bottom through the window. The girl says that they seem to be far enough away from these walkers. She offers to rest before they hit the road. She turns to him and says that while they have time, she would like to clarify a couple of points, namely who he is, why he has things like peanuts and penicillin that ordinary people don't have. At first, he doubts and thinks what to say, even though this Xiao Yunlan looks, in his opinion, a very capable girl. But she will never reveal her cards. He thinks that if he reveals his secret, nothing good will happen, which means that he needs to somehow then dodge. He sits on the bed and after his thoughts just throws her a bottle of penicillin. She catches, examines and guesses that it is penicillin. Qin Shuang tells her to take the whole jar. She says she will accept it as a reward for saving her. Qin Shuang tells her that if she promises to follow him and protect him, then she can get more. He asks her how it is and offers to make a deal. She looks at the jar and asks if he's serious. He puts his hands to the side and tells her that it's not worth it. Let him just take it. He also mentions that he has not only penicillin, but also other things that she just craves. The girl asks if there is really something more important. He laughs at first and begins to list the food. Steamed lamb, bear's paw, which is also steamed, boiled seaweed, fried duck and chicken, fried goose, pickled salted duck, chicken and sauce, bacon, canned eggs, tripe, dried meat, sausage, smoked chicken with a white belly, steamed pork. Xiao Yunlan imagines it all. She's already drooling. After all the enumerations, she tells him to stop, and that she will not agree to defend him just because of such things, especially someone who may end up in the camp of her opponents. Qin Shuang says that there is no need to worry about it, because he does not belong to any camp. She can just consider him a spoiled handsome man who will end her life in paradise. But in general, in fact, he is just an unlucky hard worker of the 21st century. Xiao Yunlan thinks, well, yes, he looks exactly like a spoiled one. In her opinion, she reflects that she survived thanks to the penicillin he gave her. She doesn't like to realize it, but he is her savior. Finally, she says out loud that she's in. She asks him if it is true. His name is Qin Shuang. She says that from now on she will always follow him and protect him. But if she finds even a hint that his words were a lie, then she will let him into the cutlets. He smiles and says that she can call him just Shuang, pointing to her t-shirt, where his name is written. He also says, calling her baby Lanlin, that her happiness has come. He is still sitting on the bed. Xiao Yunlan is standing in front of him. He says that now that the contract is concluded, can he ask her something? She asks about what. Thus, a mini tour of the world is arranged, where the girl tells about what happened in this world after all. She is literally standing at the blackboard with a pointer stick, and he is sitting at his desk trying to write something down. The culprit of the end of the world is the R virus, which turned normal people into zombies, with an infection rate of 80%, reducing the world's population from 9 billion people to 1.5 billion and turned the remaining 7.5 billion into zombies. The core has both plant and mineral properties, and can be consumed directly by living beings, used to prepare evolutionary potions or as an energy reserve. When directly ingested, it provides a large amount of energy for a short period of time, replenishes the supply of nutrients, and has a small chance to promote emotion. Having prepared the evolution potion, there is a high probability that the organism will evolve, with different effects depending on its constitution. Evolution potions are divided into levels 1, 2, and 3. Level 1 has a 20% chance of evolution. Level 2 minus 30%. Level 3 has a 35% chance. They can be used individually or in arrays of 1, 3, 9 pieces to form energy arrays that can fully or even perfectly utilize the full power of the core. The core is also a common post-apocalyptic equivalent that can be exchanged for various materials. Due to the rapid adaptation of the R virus, which developed an amazing resistance to various antibiotics developed in the postmodern era, the effect of various high-tech genetic antibiotics was minimal. And it was penicillin antibiotics, which were the most common antibiotics many years ago, that proved to be exceptionally effective. But since the microorganisms synthesizing penicillin, such as syncillin, have also mutated and are difficult to produce under adverse conditions, penicillin has become a particularly valuable life-saving drug. In recent days, people have been loosely organized, like ancient tribal unions, with small organizations dependent on regional organizations, medium-sized organizations, and medium-sized organizations controlled by large organizations. Now they are in Chengdu. There are 3 small organizations, Camp 17, earth construction and ascending together. She says the group they met earlier was from Camp 17. They are an organization of an undisguised mafia that burns, kills and robs everything, has an almost perverted thirst for all kinds of materials, including women. They kill for pleasure and even eat terribly. The organization is large and located in Yuzhou. Qin Shuang thinks about the words and says that, in general, he understood everything. They stand at the window again and look into the distance. The girl says there are too many zombies in this area, and he's a real bag. She does not think that they will be able to return to the base today and then suggests finding a place to stay for the night. She tells him to go to bed and she will look after him. He only thinks. The girl closes her eyes in a sitting position. He says out loud that if you just look at her face, it's pretty hard to imagine that she's as combative as he knows her. After a while, Qin Shuang tells the system what he needs in the 21st century. She announces that the transfer is starting. He closes his eyes and then realizes that something is hard for him. He opens his eyes and sees a girl with long pink hair sitting on top of him and asking him if he's awake. Qin Shuang, of course, does not understand what is happening. He assumes a sitting position. From the sudden movement, the girl hit herself. Qin Shuang calls her mistress and asks why she is here. She replies that he was hit by some madman, but let him not be afraid, because the doctor said that everything is fine. She also says with a smile that it is good that she established his emergency contact. Otherwise the hospital would not be able to find anyone who would pay the hospital bill. Qin Shuang asks when he even had time. She does not answer and asks him if he is hungry. She can go down to buy him something to eat. He blushes and asks this hostess what she needs from him at all. She laughs at how embarrassed he was, that she was even embarrassed. Well, gee. She gets up, takes her purse and says that he doesn't even have any necessities here. She decides to go buy him anything. She asks if he needs something specific. He replies that, perhaps, there is. Then she asks him to just make a list. She's leaving. He is sitting alone on the bed and decides that while there is no one, he needs to deal with the system. He only realized that if you turn to the system, then a kind of menu appears on his hand. He looks at his forearm and calls it obvious that he has 3 buttons: memory, transfer, charge. He wonders how he should charge it and how much more is left. A girl with pink hair walks in, announcing out loud that she's back and out of breath with huge bags. He gets out of bed in order to help her. She replies that she will cope on her own, and let him not strain himself, because he is sick. He thinks that she is his mistress Zhang Luozu, a rich girl. Even if he was blind, he would understand that she likes him. But he will never have so much money to give her happiness. That's why he does not respond to her feelings. However, if he has a system now, there should be a huge profit from the sale of goods between 2 worlds. And with this money, maybe she and he. Suddenly the door opens. The girl turns around, calls the man who arrived Uncle Zhao and asks him what he is doing here, and how he found out where she is. She calls her Xiao Zhu and says that her father asked him to pick her up and take her to Yuhai Xuan's for dinner. She is angry and says that she said she wouldn't go because he has his own plans. He pushes her to the exit. She rebels that she won't go and let him not push her. He tells her that she must be there because it is her father's order. He pushes her out the door and asks her to wait down there. She asks through the crack of the door what he's up to. He dryly replies that it does not concern her and let her leave already. This uncle turns to Qin Shuang, who asks if there are any problems. Uncle says that he thought they had already cleared everything up, but he keeps dragging Xiao Zhu into his problems. Then he asks if he really wants to say that the money that was offered to him is not enough. He answers Uncle's question with a question about what will happen if he becomes rich. They are both silent at first, but then the uncle says whether he knows that there is one phrase, that the little man has big ambitions, but he knows everything about Qin Shuang, and then complacently and rudely tells him that he will never reach the top in his life. Qin Shuang just looks at him viciously and silently. He is transported to another world. Yuan Lan tells him to wake up, because it's already dawn and it's time for them to go. From here the road to the base will take about an hour. Qin Shuang yawns sweetly and stretches. They are already walking on narrow roofs, and zombies are swarming from below and trying to reach them. The girl walks confidently, followed by Qin Shuang, trembling and asking to wait for her. At a certain moment, the girl informs that they are in place. They are standing at the edge of the roof. Xiao Yunlan throws a stone at the wall. Some bridge descends from the wall, which helps them to move to another building. They enter the room. The girl tells him that this is their base. Qin Shuang says that it is so well hidden that you won't even realize from the outside that there is a room inside. She doesn't comment on it in any way and just goes ahead. They enter a room where there is a bed with a person. Xiao Yunlan walks up to the bed, calls the person Yu Ruo and says she came back with penicillin. Qin Shuang is frightened by the sight. There lies a girl all bandaged up with the same large veins and spots. She calls Xiao Yunlan's sister. Xiao Yunlan gives Yu Ruo a pill and asks her to take the medicine. Then very soon she will feel much better. Qin Shuang asks her if this is her sister and what happened to her. She replies that her sister was wounded by a zombie, so she went on a sortie yesterday to get the core of a mutant zombie and exchange it for penicillin, but stumbled upon an ambush by those scumbags from Camp 17. Her little sister asks Xiao Yunlan if she was ambushed, if she was injured. She replies that she is fine and asks her not to worry. She also mentions that she brought Qin Shuang, and that he got them penicillin, and if not for his help yesterday, she would not have returned. Her little sister tells him that she is very grateful and calls him their savior. He sadly replies that there's nothing. He thinks to himself that it's just a miracle that two girls managed to survive in such a world. He remembers those lifeless zombie faces. They sit down at the table. Xiao Yunlan brings 2 cups of food and tells him to eat. He rejoices and says that they have been on their feet all day. He is simply starving. He eats with great appetite and thanks her for the food. But then he throws up in the trash all that he managed to eat. Xiao Yunlan asks if it is not delicious at all. She is surprised because she is fine. After the nausea, he rubs his mouth and asks if they always eat this. He starts crying. She asks why he is crying. Is it really so disgusting? He says no, but he just feels sorry for the two of them. Then he confidently says that they will stop eating this garbage. He is looking for something in his pocket. She asks, in the sense of enough, what does it mean, because she barely fished it all out of the river. At this time, Qin Shuang finds it in his pocket, announces it, asks her to open her mouth and shoves something white at her. She starts chewing, tasting, her eyes start to shine, because it's yummy. She enjoys, speaks out loud about this rich milky taste, this divine sweetness. Qin Shuang asks her how she is, if she hears him at all, then says that it is a toffee white rabbit and asks if it tastes good to her. She confidently says that it is very tasty. He says that if you liked it, then he has more. He starts looking in his pockets again. He pulls the candy to her. She opens her mouth and starts aggressively eating the candy with his outstretched hand. He panics and tells her to wait and asks her not to bite off his hand. She blushes and says again that it's yummy and asks for more of these toffees. He rubs his hand and tells her he can. He gives her a few grand. Xiao Yunlan gives toffee to her little sister and tells her to try it. She tries and says the same thing as Xiao Yunlan. Then she asks what it is. The sister replies that it is milk toffee white rabbit. Their friend has just given her a taste of it. She says again that it's so delicious and how wonderful it is to live. Xiao Yunlan tells her to chew slower because there are many more like that. In the background, Qin Shuang is crying because they are so sorry. He gives all the goodies to them. Xiao Yunlan is surprised. She sees these snacks and says that these are the goodies she read about in books. Where did he get them from? She cautiously asks him if it's really all them. He says that, yes, and let them eat for their health and not worry, because he has a lot of them. She straightens up and gives him the bag. He asks what it is. She replies that these are all the cores that she managed to collect, and now they belong to him. Xiao Yunlan hands him the bag of kernels that she managed to collect, and now they belong to Qin Shuang. He squeezes his hand, because as soon as she handed him the kernels, the seal on his left hand began to burn. He thinks, are they somehow connected to each other? Qin Shuang says it's fine, he'll take them, but then asks if she's sure she wants to give them all, because judging by her words, it's a very valuable thing. The girl says that the penicillin he gave her and her sister saved their lives. She also says that such food costs much more kernels. So far she has managed to collect only a small part, but then she promises that she will gradually repay him the entire debt. Suddenly, the topic of conversation changes by asking Qin Shuang if they have a toilet. He needs a big one. The girl points out the direction, then leaves with a bag, thanks her and says she will be back soon. He comes into the room and sees just a hole on the floor. He says it's a compost toilet. It's just lovely. He feels that the hole is deep here. And then he says it doesn't matter, he wants to get started. He opens the bag and says that while he is alone, it's time to study what kind of thing this zombie core is. He takes one out and applies it to his forearm. Its icon and the core itself are attracted to each other, forming a physical process similar to a current. As he thought, the core and the seal are somehow connected, because it burns again. After a while, the core disappears, as if it is sucked directly into his hand, which he is very surprised at. The system notifies that his charge has been replenished. He has been added the transfer possibilities for 2 pieces, and now he has a total of 3 transfer possibilities. He guesses that he needs the cores to recharge the system. He takes more cores in order to charge even more. While he was charging his system with great zeal, some cores just fell into the hole. The system notifies again and again that the charge is replenished. When the number of transfer possibilities has reached 9, he says that 9 is enough for him for now, and the remaining cores he doesn't finish because he sees that there are very few of them left in the bag. He wonders where his cores are, because there was a full bag right there, why there were only a couple of pieces left. He gets up, looks in the direction of the hole, from which a terrible stench emanates, and realizes that they fell exactly there. He comes out of the toilet depressed, guilty, and even with a smell. The girl sees his appearance and asks what happened and what happened to his face. He only replies that he was just constipated. There are still crowds of zombies on the street. Xiao Yunlan takes out his signature food again and gives it to Qin Shuang to eat. He doesn't understand why this particular food. Didn't he give her a bunch of delicious food? She asks how you can just eat such valuable food every day, especially since she worked hard to get it all from the river, not to waste the good. The girl starts to eat. He gets up from the table, removes the spoon from her hands and says that there is nothing to save, because he said that he has more if necessary. She asks if he didn't give her all the food he had. He thinks that she doesn't know that he has more supplies in the system storage. If he gets more food right now, it will be strange for her, but his supplies won't be enough for the three of them for a few days. He needs to go back and take more food with him. He clears his throat and finally says out loud that, to tell the truth, he is a merchant. Every few days they send him things to sell, so he asks her to believe that he has plenty of food. She asks again about the merchant and says why he didn't say it before. He replies that he didn't trust her at first, and in general, tomorrow he will go for the goods and bring even more food. The next day, he leaves, notifying others that he is going for goods. She asks him to wait and asks him to pick up something. She gives him a gun. He asks why this revolver is so small. She replies that it doesn't matter, the main thing is its effectiveness, because it is an excellent weapon for covert killings. She asks to take it with her just in case. She asks again if he will definitely go alone. Maybe she should still go with him. He replies that he doesn't need to, because he can handle it and will be back soon. He leaves, closing the door behind him. Her little sister gets out of bed, calls Xiao Yunlan. She wonders if Yu Ruo can already walk. She replies that yes, because the medicine that Qin Shuang brought works very well. Xiao Yunlan says it's great. Sis tells her to follow Qin Shuang to find out where he went. She asks why this is. The sister replies that his behavior and appearance are not at all like the locals, and he also knows very little about their world. She assumes that the words that he is a merchant are most likely lies to distract attention, and in general she suspects, even though he is extremely generous to them, it's too early for him trust. Qin Shuang leaves the girls. In a certain place he thinks that he seems to have gone far enough, and no one followed him. He looks around, sees that no one is there and orders the system to transfer to his real world. The system announces that the transfer is starting. He wakes up in the hospital again. He gets out of bed and says it's time to be discharged. Otherwise he has no money for such a long stay in the hospital. He's walking down the street, looking at some kind of note with a sad face. This month he has not been able to find a job, and all his savings are about to end. It used to seem to him that he would get rich someday, but in the end he is just a poor bastard. He thinks that the main thing now is to take valuable food for that world. Food and medicine, of course, are very much appreciated in that world, but it has no buyers at all. If he goes to that scumbag camp and tries to sell something, they'll just take everything away and then finish him off. He takes a lot of packs of food, goes to the cash register and asks to calculate. Behind him, another customer, and the cashier are surprised by such a number. Qin Shuang thinks that although Xiao Yunlan is quite agile, she is weak, so she can help him not to become zombie food at most. While the cashier is punching through one product after another, Qin Shuang continues to think that, like she said, there are quite peaceful camps. He decides to try to get in touch with them. His thoughts are interrupted by the cashier, saying that in total he has 54,000 yuan, which is about 12,000. At first, he is afraid of the numbers, but then he just says, of course, and pays. He goes to some building with huge packages, enters a room and says that in his opinion there is still enough space in the system storage. Then he remembers that he still needs to grab a change of clothes. He needs half of the core for one transfer. He needs to try to spend less of these transfers. He remembers his failure in the toilet, grits his teeth and regrets, because he shouldn't have saved so much. Meanwhile, in a world full of zombies, Xiao Yunlan is looking hard for Qin Shuang. She says it's strange because this Qin Shuang just disappeared. And then she wonders if she's really that bad at surveillance. She decides to stand on the roof, because here is a great place to watch. Sometime he should reappear. Qin Shuang appears in the room with a huge backpack on his shoulders and a huge box in his hands. He decides to put some of the things in a backpack so that they don't suspect anything. He walks across the bridge. He looks down in the crowds of zombies and says that when he left, there were no zombies there. There is such a crowd that he decides it's better to get around them somehow. He keeps walking, but suddenly doesn't realize what's going on, because the further he goes, the more zombies. He screams, calling Xiao Yunlan for help. He looks at the sky. Zombies are reaching out to him. He realizes that there is already an abyss, and there is no way to get through and decides it's better to return. But suddenly he sees that the zombies are already on the same surface with him. They are walking slowly, and with an oblique gait straight towards him. He gets so scared that he screams and sticks out his eyes. One zombie with a crazy but lifeless face is walking towards him. The zombie pushes him down. All his snacks and food spill out. He falls, but manages to hold onto some rope. The rest of the zombies just fell to the ground. He panics and tells the system to move it. The system, at the wrong time, says that the passive ability, the skill of rapid climbing, is already being used, and asks whether to improve it. He shouts that he can't stand it and asks for a transfer soon. The system tells him that he has 7 skill points. The cost of improving a passive ability is equal to 1 skill point. Each subsequent improvement of the ability is equal to twice the number of points for the previous improvement. He shouts why she is talking, and sharply twice tells the system to improve. She announces that the passive climbing ability has been improved by 2 levels, and 1 + 2 experience points have been spent. A sound is made. Some kind of aura appears around it, similar to lightning. Now he only holds on with one hand. He says it's cool because he can now easily hold on to the wire with one hand. He pulls his legs up to him and says that it's just miracles. He stands on the wire and says that he can still walk on the wire just like on the ground. He's thrilled because he's like Spider-Man. He bends over and parodies Spider-Man. Xiao Yunlan is looking at him. She thought that this Qin Shuang was an ordinary sissy, but it turns out that he is so clever. She thinks Yu Ruo was right, that this guy is far from simple. Qin Shuang descends from the wire and lands on the ground. He decides to climb somewhere higher to find another way to the base, because that road is full of zombies. He thinks that there will be a good view from that building. He quickly climbs up the wall. Now it's easier for him to climb the wall. He wonders if there are any other abilities in this system. He wants to try them out as soon as possible. He stops at some window, looks inside the building, and again sees a crowd of zombies that growl and want to pounce on him. He farts and says that these zombies are even more disgusting up close. He asks if they want to taste fresh meat, and then tells them to try to catch it, calling them smelly zombies. Suddenly, the window glass begins to crack and finally breaks to pieces. He falls right on the zombies, who reach out to him with their hands and growling. He swears and gets so scared that both snot and tears flow. He jerks his hand sharply towards the zombie in order to defend himself. As a result, this hand just hits the zombie that his head flies off. Qin Shuang himself did not understand at first. Did his hands become so strong that he could easily take off the head of a zombie? His hand is covered in blood. Unexpectedly, another zombie will attack him from behind. Qin Shuang also easily kills him, but he understands that even if he were Edward Scissorhands, he would not be able to cope with such a crowd of zombies. He needs to get out of there urgently. He jumps out of the window, holding onto another window. The zombies that followed him just fell out of the window down. He holds onto the wall, sees the attacking zombies, and says it was dangerous. If even a piece of skin is pierced through him, you can already say goodbye to life. In such a dangerous world, it's better not to show off once again. He notices that it has suddenly become easier for him to move around. He wonders why this is. But then he realizes that it's easy for him, because a huge backpack has disappeared. He looks down, eyes searching for his backpack, and finally finds it on the ground among a crowd of zombies. He is already crying and wondering why it turns out that during this trip he did not get anything and all the precious things were lost. He spent all his hard-earned fortune on them. Then he gets ready and firmly says that no, he was going to save this money for his funeral, so he must return the backpack at any cost. After a while, he descends closer to the zombie, stretches out his head and arm. He tells them that he has returned and asks, waving this hand, if they would like to eat his white pen. Zombies reflexively attack him, but he moves away, after which the zombie falls through the window again. He also mocks, saying that everything is right, let them take their time and everyone falls in turn. After everyone has fallen, he looks into the room and concludes that everyone is downstairs. Well, the crowd, his arm is already numb to spank them. He sees his backpack on the floor, comes in, takes the backpack and dusts it off. He also says what to be afraid of, you just need to be able to cheat. Suddenly something has happened. He feels someone's presence. He wonders if it was really his imagination, or if he really just saw a red shadow or what it was at all. He looks around, checking the room, and assumes that his eyes are rippling. But in the end, he sees a peculiar creature of red color. It revolves around him. All this time Qin Shuang does not move. He is frozen in fear. As soon as the blood dripped on him from this zombie, he begins to panic and scream. This zombie with bright and red eyes is attacking him. After being hit, Qin Shuang flew towards the door, which opened. Accordingly, he hits the wall of the corridor. Blood flows from his mouth. He groans in pain. He gets up quickly and decides to just run away. He is followed by this red zombie with a sly laugh. In the process of running, he thinks that this is a strange zombie. His speed is so great that he does not even see how he is approaching him. If he is now transported to his world to hide, then the next time he is transferred, he will still be here. And then it turns out that he will waste the cores. While he is running, the zombie moves from wall to wall at such a speed that it is not even visible. He realizes that he is almost catching up with him. He decides to go to the bank. The zombie jumps at him, opening its mouth. Qin Shuang tells the system that he wants to spend all the remaining cores and skill points to improve. A sound is made from the system, and it announces that all skill points have been spent. The climbing speed has been improved to level 6. Special skills of courage and prudence have been obtained, as well as a firm step. All the forces are activated and Qin Shuang manages to escape from the zombie attack to the side. He realizes that now he sees all his movements, and even manages to dodge his attacks. He continues to run away from him, realizing that he still continues to pursue him. It is not so easy for him to get away from him. He used all the skill points, and in the end just matched him in speed. He says out loud that he thought that he would be able to pin him after leveling up the ability. At this rate, his strength is quickly running out. He won't last long. If he slows down even for a second, the zombie will catch up with him and grab his neck to bite. He stops and sees a zombie rapidly approaching him. Qin Shuang looks at him carefully, waiting for the zombie's actions. As soon as he attacks from a decent distance, Qin Shuang takes a stick and stabs the zombie in the shoulder with it. The zombie hangs on a stick, bleeding, his limbs dangle, and he giggles endlessly, which makes Qin Shuang uneasy. He does not understand, therefore he is still alive. This is terrible for him. While the crowd of zombies is on the street, Qin Shuang takes out the zombie core with his hand. The dead zombie is lying on the floor. He bends down wearily and says that it seems he was able to cover something after all. He leaves the building, followed by Xiao Yunlan. She is surprised that he was able to get out. She thinks that he is about on the same level with her in strength. He walks across the bridge, comes in and announces to the girls that he is back. He shouts at them to go see what good things he brought them. He is sure that they will be just shocked. Yu Ruo turns to him and asks if he has really returned. She is already standing all healthy in normal clothes without bandages. He does not recognize her and asks who she is. She introduces Yu Ruo, winking at him, and asks if he didn't recognize her without the bandages. She also asks him why he has blood on his clothes, if he is injured. He replies that he's fine, and that it's just zombie blood. She flirts with him and asks if he says it honestly, because he can't deceive her and she'd rather examine him. Qin Shuang blushes and hugs her to him. He says that it's fine, let her examine him properly, because such a sweet loli wants to examine him. He could not even dream of such a thing. He just enjoys the fact that they are standing close together, saying how wonderful life is. Yu Ruo walks away and says that he is really fine, and now she is calm. She takes his hand and tells him that he is so dirty and that he needs to wash as soon as possible. She invites him to wash together. He blushes even more and asks if she really suggests that he go to bathe together. She winks and says that this is exactly what she is offering, because there are very few water sources now, so they need to save. In the shower, Yu Ruo washes himself, applying foam to his hair. Qin Shuang looks at her in awkwardness and uncertainty. The sister calls him, asking what he is digging there. She tells him to undress and come in soon. He asks if she thinks her sister will kill him if she finds out. She turns to him and asks why she should be angry, because they also wash together with her, and then says, okay, he's all ready. She calls him to come in soon. He says, undressing, well, if so, it would be rude to refuse. Then he comes to her with a great desire, admiring her. But abruptly, Xiao Yunlan grabs his hair and says that he should stand. Then she asks in anger if he really saw her sister not dressed. He laughs nervously and says that he did not see anything, and begins to tell that, to be honest, he has had a vision of -8,000 since childhood. He is so short-sighted that one day he did not recognize his own uncle when he stood 3 centimeters in front of him. After a while, the already dressed Qin Shuang, under the fierce and evil gaze of Xiao Yunlan, first laughs, and then tells them to see what good things he brought them. He takes food out of his backpack and says that there is so much food here that they will have enough for several days. He takes bananas out of his backpack and says that he brought fruit for a balanced diet. Xiao Yunlan's eyes already glistened at the sight of bananas. He hands it to her and asks if she really likes bananas so much. He cleans one for her, peeling off the peel and giving her a taste. She opens her mouth, wraps her lips around the banana and bites off. Qin Shuang looks at her very strangely with red cheeks. Xiao Yunlan is delighted with the sweetness and taste of the banana. She looks at Qin Shuang, who is standing looking at the top and trembling all over. She asks what's wrong with him. He says to be quiet. She wants to replay this moment a little more. The sisters sit and eat. Yu Ruo says how much delicious, it's like she's in a dream. Xiao Yunlan asks Qin Shuang if he really gives them all the pile of food. Does he know that these are all very, very precious things? Qin Shuang replies that yes, he knows, but he promised them that he would be generous and kind to them if they promised to protect him. Xiao Yunlan thinks that's right, whatever it is, she should keep her promise, but when he got into trouble, she watched him from hiding and did not come to help. Then he tells them out loud that, unfortunately, his savings will only be saved one more time and you need to figure out a way to make money. And he thinks to himself that he needs to figure out a way to get the cores to use the transfer, because all the cores have gone to pumping abilities. Xiao Yunlan asks why he needs money. They are just unnecessary paper now, it's even inconvenient to wipe with them. He immediately gathers his thoughts and says that he meant gold, silver, well, or something like that. His trade is based on the exchange of these values for things. Xiao Yunlan abruptly gets up from the table, while her sister Yu Ruo appetizingly eats food, soiling the area around her mouth. Xiao Yunlan starts looking for something under the table, pushing it away while the two watch her movements. She takes out a gold bar, puts it on the table and asks him if it will go. He no longer sees one ingot, but several shiny ingots. He takes the ingot in his hands and says that it feels like gold. Xiao Yunlan says that's right, she remembers, that's what it was called, now it's also a useless thing. It's square, so she decided to put it under the table leg. She asks again if it will pass for suitable values. She turns around and points to the gold bars that stand under the legs of the tables and says that if she fits, then she has 5 or 6 more of these under the table. Xiao Yunlan eats his food and tells him to take it for himself, because they don't use it anyway. Qin Shuang looks at the shiny square bars of gold and can't believe his eyes. A bright moonlit night. Qin Huang is lying on the bed, laughing softly. He says that he is rich. Someone in boots approaches him. He still mumbles words in the process of sleeping that he is now rich and finally he can. Yu Ruo approaches him with a knife. He swings it at Qin Shuang and attacks him, when suddenly Xiao Yunlan grabs her hand. She whispers to her little sister, "What is she doing?" She looks at him angrily and says that if they kill him right now, then all his precious things will belong to them. Xiao Yunlan says that this is impossible, because he saved them, and if it wasn't for penicillin, the sisters would already be in the next world, so that's what she wants to repay for her help. Yu Ruo gets angry and whispers to her, has she really forgotten why they were on such a day? A certain Hu Xiao Rong is the one who was able to ingratiate himself into Xiao Yunlan's confidence with the same behavior. Yu Ruo asks what happened in the end. They betrayed them and leaked information to Camp 17. A few dozen people from their base all died, and only they survived, Xiao Yunlan and Yu Ruo. My sister says that if she hadn't gone into the shower, she would have put out his eye long ago. Xiao Yunlan tells her that Qin Shuang is not like that, because he didn't need to waste penicillin on the two of them, who are on the verge of death. Yes, if they sell everything they have, they will not be given a bottle of penicillin for it. And Qin Shuang just gave them such a value, so he is definitely not a bad person. Suddenly Qin Shuang wakes up and asks the sisters what happened to them, what they are whispering about. Yu Ruo jumps on his bed, calls him Brother Shuang and says she wants to sleep with him. Qin Shuang tells her, so she would have said so right away, why waste her precious time? Xiao Yunlan suddenly intervenes and tells Qin Shuang that she also wants to sleep with him. Yu Ruo immediately frowns, and the surprised Qin Shuang asks if she also wants, then he will sleep in the middle. Qin Shuang is happy and relaxed lying between two girls. Yu Ruo is pressed close to him. Xiao Yunlan is lying quietly on the other side. When Qin Shuang falls asleep, Yu Ruo takes out a weapon from under the pillow again and aims at Qin Shuang's pelvis. She swings, but then Xiao Yunlan interferes with her again. She kicks the weapon with her foot so that it flies away with a squeal. Qin Shuang wakes up abruptly from the fact that he feels someone's body on him. It was Xiao Yunlan's attempt to save him who had to sit on him. He asks her with a sly and suspicious look what she is doing. She doesn't answer and looks at him in silence. In the background, an angry and offended Yu Ruo looks at the two. Qin Shuang says that if she wants to talk, then let them do it alone, because her sister is here, if anything. Xiao Yunlan leans over to him and says that he wants them to sleep, just the two of them. He's panicking. Xiao Yunlan turns to Yu Ruo and says confidently, while she looks at her angrily, that from today Xiao Yunlan and Qin Shuang are sleeping together, and if someone suddenly wants to attack at night, then she will be able to fight back. Qin Shuang says that this is true, because safety is important, so he can go for it. The next day, Yu Ruo sits next to Qin and asks him a question. She assumes that he is one of the evolved ones. He turns to him and asks why. He's just the most ordinary handsome. She asks, looking straight at him, then how did he climb the skyscraper? He asks her how she knows this. She points to her nose and says that she has a keen sense of smell, and that when he returned home, she smelled everything. She pretends to be delighted and scared and says that the building is very scary, and only the coolest evolved ones are able to get out of there alive. And for sure, he is so cool too. Qin Shuang smiles and says that he just got lost yesterday, and then came across a couple of zombies, and also thanks to Xiao Yunlan's revolver, he managed to survive. In general, he did not take a revolver with him at all. He thinks to himself that he can't just say that the system helped him, so far he can only deceive them. Then Xiao Yunlan says that this means that he is a good shot. Then she invites him to go shoot at the range. As a result, he never got to the training ground. Xiao Yunlan asks him if he was aiming accurately at the target or if he has vision problems. Tired and drooping, he just stands next to her with a gun. Then Xiao Yunlan approaches him and says that well, here he gives. The weapon is not held like that, and she offers him to teach him how to hold a weapon. She puts her hand under Qin Shuang's arm. He only blushes. Xiao Yunlan tells Qin Shuang to relax his shoulder and not keep his body in such tension. Stand still and aim. She shouts at him to start the fire. He pulls the trigger, but still the bullet flew past the target, but into the board itself. He is happy that he got there. The system tells him that the ability to wield ranged weapons is available, and the system also asks him if it is worth improving this skill. Qin Shuang pays attention to this. He thinks that there are still other abilities in the system, but he has no cores left at all. Only one of the red zombies that he managed to kill. There are 2 skill points in the core. One such point is spent on transferring. He decides it's better to leave the points for transferring to his world. He doesn't have so many of them to spend on improving a new ability. He asks Xiao Yunlan if she knows by any chance where you can buy kernels here. She answers with a question. Does he mean to exchange valuables for cores? If so, then there is such a place. 2 kilometers from here there is a small exchange point. She thinks it's possible to get cores there. He tells her that it's great and asks her to take him there. They enter some kind of gate. A man is sitting there with one eye closed and reading a newspaper. There's a knock on his door. He turns around and tells them to come in. Both come in and see this guy with a gun in his hands, aiming right at them. Xiao Yunlan calls him Old Pepper and asks why he was so scared. Does he think there are still zombies in such a place? He lowers his weapon and asks them for forgiveness. The man says that he is not afraid of zombies, but of people. Finally, he asks what they want to exchange. Qin Shuang says that he needs the cores, whether this man will find them. He asks what he can give in return. Qin Shuang puts 3 tin cans on the table. The man is surprised, picks up this jar, looks at it and says that this thing is canned food from the distant beginning of the 21st century. In their time there are very few of them left. Qin Shuang takes the jar from his hands, tells him to wait and asks for the kernels first. He laughs, saying that you can't fool him, because at first glance he is a fool, but in fact he is quite smart. He smiles and says that he himself has just said that he is afraid of people, not zombies, so you need to be always on your guard. The man asks them to wait here, and he will go and bring everything. He comes back, puts a white bag on the table and says that these are all the cores he has, and there are 11 of them in total. He also says that he usually gives only 2 cores for a jar of expired meat. But Qin Shuang has canned food of the highest quality, so he will give him 4 cores for a jar of fresh meat. He says he can exchange 3 of his cans for 12 cores, but he only has 11 of them, so he owes him 1 core. He keeps talking and offers him to make a deal, and he will return the remaining core later. Qin Shuang takes out another jar and says that there is no need to return it, and in addition he will give him 4 more cans. The man does not understand and asks him again. Qin Shuang leans over to him and says that he has a request for him. He asks suspiciously what kind of request is this. Qin Shuang takes out a square gold ingot and asks to look carefully and say what it is. He thinks about it, scratches his chin and says that his eyesight is not very good, but it must be gold. He rejoices and says that everything is right, everything is fine with his eyesight. After all, it's not for nothing that they came to him. He puts the jar on the table and says that an additional jar of stew is his commission. He addresses him as an uncle, calling him that, and says that he probably knows a lot of people. He asks this uncle to ask people to collect this gold for him, and in return he will give him canned food. He asks how he likes such a deal. He asks him with disbelief to listen that his trading plan sounds quite profitable. But why does he need gold? Because it has long been a useless thing. The one with a sly smile and a satisfied face asks him not to even worry about it and just try to find him for Qin Shuang. And of course, the more the better, and the better as much as possible. He shows a sign with his hands, forming a circle with 3 fingers up, indicating that everything will be fine. Everything will be okay. They're coming out. After a while, the system notifies him that the charge is replenished. He applies the core to his arm again, and it is absorbed into his skin. The system reports the number of skill points, which is 24. Qin Shuang says out loud that he wants to improve the ability to use ranged weapons by 4 levels. A purple aura appears around him. The system makes a bell sound and says that the ability to wield ranged weapons has been improved by 4 levels, and a special active skill has been obtained, which is called a fatal bullet. His number of skill points is 9 units, and the system also notifies that the next improvement requires 16 skill points. He loads the pistol and fires the bullets several times, which are launched forward with a bright light, in a confident sideways stance and straight outstretched right arm, and they all hit the target directly. He exclaims that he hit the bullseye, rejoicing at this. He confidently looks at the target with a satisfied smile, and says that now he has reached the level of a skilled shooter. He is still at the training ground practicing his new skills acquired by the system, thanks to the exchange of 4 cans of stew with a man who exchanged them for 11 cores. He says to himself that he has received a new special skill, which is called a fatal bullet. He thinks it sounds like something really unrealistically cool. He decides to try it out. He holds the gun in front of him with both hands. The system gives him a hint that the fatal bullet can be used for free only 1 time a day. Of course, Qin Shuang doesn't like it and asks what this system is doing, why it is so greedy. He puts up with it and finally asks the system, so how can he apply this skill? The system tells him that he needs to say words like fatal bullet and give the order to shoot, and then the fatal bullet will shoot in this way. Qin Shuang doesn't like it. He asks if this is a joke. Does he really look like some kind of superhero? Why does he need to shout something to use the skill? It's such a shame. The system starts to argue with him already, asking the answer question. Don't people like to shout out the name of the technique before using it? And it also reports that this method of activating the skill was developed in accordance with his habits. He gets nervous and annoyed. Is it really now that artificial intelligence has decided to get into people? Something he does not remember being so worried about when he was on the verge of death. He looks around, sees that no one is there. He clenches his fist in his left hand, holding the gun tightly with his right hand. Then he lowers his left hand and puts it on his stomach, and raises his right hand high above his head with the gun up. He gives the command to the fatal bullet to shoot, lowering his hand and pointing the gun directly into the building. The bullet flies off with a purple aura. Both girls are watching him from the door. One asks a friend what he is doing. The other replies that she also has no idea at all. The bullet flew off into the unknown. He looks into the distance and does not understand, because the bullet hit that building. However, as he sees, nothing happened. He is disappointed and wonders what was the difference between the usual bullet and the fatal bullet. After a while, all 3 of them are already doing business. Qin Shuang thinks he needs to study this ability better. 2 girls are lifting huge bags, crates and barrels, going to remove all this junk from here, because they need to free up a room for Qin Shuang. He finally pays attention to them, is surprised and asks if it is normal for them to carry so many things at all. He offers his help. Xiao Yunlan does not understand what he is talking about, because they are light, because for evolved people such weight should not be a problem at all. She puts these bags of boxes in a corner. Qin Shuang asks if all the evolved ones are so incredible. She turns to him and says that almost everyone. In any case, ordinary survivors cannot compare with them. However, she also notices that those who were able to evolve are extremely few. He is interested in this and asks Xiao Yunlan what is needed for this, and is it possible to somehow become the same as them, evolved. The girl dusts off her hands, patting them against each other, and asks if he really wants to become one. She thinks about it and tells him that there are 3 ways to do this. The first is that when infected with the P virus, you need to overcome it and develop immunity, in which case there is a chance to become evolved. But there were many such cases during the outbreak of the virus. Now you will hardly find such a thing. The second way is to swallow the kernel. If it doesn't burst from the inside, then with a 10% chance it will become evolved. For the third method, you will need an evolution potion. A potion of the first level has a 10% chance of evolution, the second 20%, and the third 30%. She says she has heard that there are better potions in large organizations. After listening to all this, he already cheered up, despite all the warnings that Xiao Yunlan had told him about. He asks her the question of where to get these potions. He says he can exchange at least a whole bunch of valuable things for them. Xiao Yunlan replies to him that she can take him to try his luck to unite the buildings of the mainland. She also notices that they are not like Camp 17. The benefits are important to them, so they may be able to exchange the potion of evolution. He says that it's great and that they will move out tomorrow. The next day, as the sun rose, they are preparing for a hike. Against the background, Yu Ruo makes an offended face. Qin Shuang notices this and turns to Xiao Yunlan with a question. Won't Yu Ruo go with them? He says whether it seems to him or not, but lately she has been staring at him strangely all the time. Xiao Yunlan confidently and indifferently tells him not to pay attention, and also that she is staring because she has vision problems. There is still the same crowd of zombies on the street. They are all trying to climb the wall, stepping on each other. They are of different physiques. There are huge mutants, and there are frail and small ones. Xiao Yunlan wonders why it seems to her that there are more and more zombies at the base. She says she will need to find time and clear everything here. Behind him, Qin Shuang walks unsteadily, looking down at the zombies. Meanwhile, Yu Ruo is also training to shoot a pistol at the training ground. She does it aggressively and impulsively, angry at Qin Shuang and Xiao Yunlan, because she did not let her kill him in the shower or on the bed. Suddenly, the building opposite her abruptly begins to collapse, breaking into pieces. The walls broken with a crash fall apart. Buildings just fall down. Yu Ruo does not understand why so abruptly and unexpectedly, and why the building suddenly collapsed right now. Before falling into the arms of the PROTA, a small flashback is made at the moment when the blonde girl arrives with the organization to that meeting. She realizes that the PROTA is already there. By his attire, she realizes that he is completely different from the others who are standing next to him. Even by his attire that is completely alien to the real world, she tells herself that this event is her last chance because Li Chang-suk had killed her older sister who before dying had told her everything she had learned about the tutorial world. Although it was not information to die in her mind, everything she told him was recorded, including what she knew about the character Li Hoi, the only survivor of the Hell difficulty. She remembers that he published a lot of information for the newcomers about the traps, but the community treated him as a liar. She is shocked to see him and stares at him while a guy is talking to the boss. The POTRA notices her gaze and she wonders if he will know that she is the informant, and without a plan she decides to approach him. But she is attacked by the boss. From the perspective of the PROTA, he thinks that for a long time things have become complicated every time he stands out from the others and tries to solve problems. Every time he interferes, the problem becomes bigger and brings problems to the others. That's why he didn't want to be the leader of the team. Although in that world it seems that he will never be alone. He comes out of his thoughts when he sees the purple-haired man making a fuss while coughing from a blow he threw while blinking. The man asks him, exalted and dramatizing pain, why he hits people for no reason. He tells him that this is not right, and the people behind him support him, giving different comments as insults to his person. The PROTA spreads his wings and tells them that if they don't like it they should go after him. He tells them they are cowards, and everyone around him is amazed at how majestic his wings are. Quickly, the purple-haired man tells him that there is a misunderstanding and that he can explain everything. He tells him that it won't be a bad story for him and asks him to give him 5 minutes. The man approaches and tries to hit him, but the PROTA quickly flies and dodges the blow, but hits him, telling him to think that it might increase his resistance to pain. The man tells his people to get rid of him, and a boy with a sword runs out to attack him. The PROTA grabs the hand the boy is holding the sword with and avoids his attack. He quickly pushes him and hears how the boy complains in pain. The POTRA thinks that the defense function of the system works on him. He comes out of his thoughts and jumps on top of the boy when he sees that there is another one with an axe waiting for him. The POTRA thinks that the strength of that boy is comparable to a goblin instructor, but his posture is a disaster, so he comes out of his thoughts and kicks him in the chest. He thinks that the system mitigates the impact, but that doesn't mean that it goes away completely, so he continues to hit him. When the man falls completely to the ground, the POTRA thinks that the defense of the system is not perfect. It thinks that it connected perfectly to the arms, internal organs, and neck bones. The system nullifies all attacks using swords and mitigates the impact of the blows. Because of the limitations, joint strikes and choking skills cannot be used for a long time, but aiming for a critical and instantaneous hit will connect an effective hit, even if there is a quick regeneration. They will suffer pain for a brief moment. The PROTA comes out of his thoughts and realizes that Kim Min-hyuk and other players are surrounding the confederation of what he thinks are bastards. He wonders if they will be trying to stop them from running away and realizes that they thought fast. The PROTA thinks that even if they all run away, he is confident that he will capture them all, and comes out of his thoughts when he hears how someone tells him that his moves are good besides asking him what skills he uses. He is approached by a man with long black hair, and the POTRA wonders who he is, as he thought he was a gambler. He hears Kim Min-hyuk shouting that the man is Myung Jin Chan, and the POTRA thinks of the normal 6th floor. The man tells the POTRA that he is not the only one with skills, and from his sword starts to come out a violet light. The POTRA tells him that if he was done talking to come over and play some more. The POTRA sees Myung Jin Chan approaching and wonders what skill is coming out of his sword. He wonders if it is a buff, and says to himself that maybe it has an instant acceleration effect like the Goblin Instructor. From the POTRA's sword, a blue light starts to come out and the battle begins. The man throws his spear at him, and the POTRA tells him that he cannot rely on his spear in such an impatient way like that. He hits him in the belly with his sword and the man shrieks from the pain. The POTRA thinks to himself that the knife attacks in that place really do hurt, and asks the man about how he can throw his weapon at a time like that. He wonders if that thing will be one of the 5 players in the top and turns to see the leader of the organization. He wonders if he should take care of those pig bastards already, and as he approaches he sees how the man pales. Suddenly the POTRA finds himself sleeping on the grass, thinking about how perfect that place is to take a nap. Although it would have been completely perfect if it weren't for the complaints of those he calls pig bastards. An announcement appears telling him that his basic sword skill is now at level 7. He thinks about how the members of that group were extremely weak, and that allowed him to try many different combat patterns, although he didn't expect them to be weaker than a goblin. The POTRA thinks about how he has been developing his sword skills to evade his stronger opponents and attack passively, blocking with his shield and attacking their vital parts with speed. However, that time, as the guys were very weak, he was able to attack proactively using various methods, and thinks about how he feels like hitting them some more. But it won't be his turn for a while, and he sees how the people around him hit the members of the Confederation. There is a flashback where the POTRA thinks that Kim Min-hyuk made his move when he started to beat the members of the organization, rather than fighting together. That guy had used ropes to tie up the ones that the POTRA had knocked unconscious. He wondered when he had prepared the rope, for it seemed that he was planning to suppress them with his strength if anything happened. After all, the representative members of the Confederation were defeated. When PROTA was wondering what to do with them, the girl who had made eye contact with him appeared. Her name was Park Yonga. She had big blue eyes, and as one of the victims she was the one who leaked information to Kim Min-hyuk. The girl had suggested to the POTRA a way to neutralize the representative confederation. The most effective method was to send the challengers from the 1st and 2nd floor, and be prepared for anything in case they sought revenge. Also not allowing them to do the same things to the new challengers, using the representative confederation as punching bags for sparring practice as punishment, as well as using them for training, would help the victims overcome their fear, and unite to be strong enough to fight back. After sharing her thoughts, the girl gathered everyone in the field, told them about the evil deeds of the representative confederation, and the pain that the victims endured. Through that action, she gained everyone's understanding, even those who were not involved with them, and appealed for support for the victims, condemning the federation. With every word the girl said, she made all the victims unite. Following Kim Min-hyuk, the challengers stepped back and supported the girl, because the confidence with which the girl spoke showed that it was better for her to solve the problem. Back to reality. In the field, the representative confederation is helping the challengers as punching bags. Although there was criticism that it was morally wrong, things ended up like this because there was no better solution than the one proposed by the girl. With nothing else to do, the POTRA thinks about 13 hours left until the end of the event. He thinks about whether he should take a nap, but his thoughts are interrupted when the girl tells him that he had worked hard. She sits next to him and they both remain silent for a long while. Cutting the moment, the PROTA tells him that it was an awkward moment and she apologizes for that. She thanks him on behalf of her older sister and the other victims, to which he quickly wonders about that girl's older sister. She tells him that she has something to tell him. The beginning of Park Young-a's story contained everything. Even the event of that day, the story before the tutorial, inside the tutorial, and the death of her sister. Park Young-a asks Prota to please lend her his strength. She tells him that she is aware that asking for something like that is shameless, but she would definitely pay that debt. Prota tells her that paying him back is not a problem and asks her if she wants him to train her. She tells him no. What she wants is his strength at that moment, and the somewhat confused Prota asks if she wants him to get her fruits like in the manhwas. He remembers something and hands her a gun. He tells her that that is a magic tool that causes an explosion within a short range. He explains to her that it can only fire 5 rounds, but it has no user condition and is quite powerful. She asks him about how much, and the Prota tells her that he doesn't know for sure as he has never used it, so she should use it sparingly. She thanks him and tells him that from now on she will live for the good of others. She will fight to protect others, and this is how she will pay her debt. The Prota tells her that he thinks she is paying the wrong person. As he sees her walking away, he asks her where she is going, and she tells him that she is going to prove it. On another side of the field, the leader of the Confederation is tied up and receiving blows from some people. In pain, he thinks that they will see what will happen, but he sees how Park Young-a approaches him with a gun and asks him what he has in his hand. The Prota asks the girl what she intends to do, but does not receive an answer. The girl shoots in the air, and the Prota wonders what the girl is trying to do. He sees her take out a bottle of lubricant and smear some on her fingers. She grabs the man's face and sticks her fingers in his eyes, making him scream in pain, and in his right eye she buries her gun. The man screams in pain. Blood and foam come out of his eyes. She shoots him, and the Prota thinks of instant death. The girl, to prevent him from being cured by the system, blew his head off in an instant. She turns and starts walking. The Prota gives him a disapproving look, and she comments that that gun was quite useful. He thinks of her being crazy, and that it was surprising that there was someone crazier than him. Park Young-a reappeared after taking revenge against his sister's enemy. Without any emotion or purpose, he raised his hand and made a statement. Guarding the laws and public order of the Korean servant, a civilian militia was born. 2 days had passed since the unification. At first, the 5th floor raid was supposed to be summed up immediately, but the POTRA had put their plans aside to help the founding of the militia. Prota tells how numerous victims joined and became its members. Some had promised to work with Park Young-a before the day of unification. Some were hostile against the girl's actions. But a large number of challengers found inspiration in the girl's Valentine and joined the militia. Kim Min-jaeuk and Prota are having a conversation. Kim tells him that the girl looks like Joan of Arc, and Prota tells him that she looks more like a demon covered in blood. The players who destroyed the Rep Guild, including Kim and POTRA, joined the militia, which established a number of rules and law and order required to ensure that the challengers have a minimum of safety and rights, which was not to protect the players or assailants, but the weak, the lower floor challengers, and for that purpose they worked on forming some foundational rules. The first rule decreed that assault was not allowed. The second rule decreed that rape was not allowed. The third rule decreed that robbery was not allowed. The fourth rule decreed that violating the freedom of others was not allowed. Some people objected, considering that breaking the rules would result in punishment, according to the internal rules of the civilian militia, but Park Young-a and supporters went ahead. The discussions ended. 3 members of the representative guild were executed, and the other members were put on probation to be observed. But due to executions by firearms and all kinds of violence at its peak, the minds of the remaining members were completely destroyed. That gave the Prota and his friends to understand that they should not worry about a rebellion. But a portion of the militia gave up on clearing the tutorial and were assigned to the 2nd floor just in case anything happened. The Prota and his friends realized that it was necessary to guide the newcomers and give them an explanation of the rules. Kim Min-jaeuk would prepare the newcomers who would come during the next session, distribute notices and manuals among the community, and that's how things finally ended in the early morning of the next day. In another part of the tutorial, the Prota complains about some drops that fall on his hand. He thinks about the annoyance that it causes him and that this practical work did not fit him. The POTRA is in a kind of vault and reaches the end where he sees an iron door. He realizes that it is the boss room of the 5th floor. He thinks about what skill with the sword he has climbed. So it was time to say goodbye to that floor. Although he was worried, he was confident in his abilities and had faith that he would do well. He opens the door and purple rays come out of it. At the end of the door he sees a green lizard person sitting on his back, with a brown panty, a cape of that color, and next to the animal there is a newt. The PROTA gets a notification that the challenge will start in 30 seconds. He wonders if he should just defeat him, if it is a sudden one-on-one duel, and thinks about that single lizard person being stronger than a horde of goblins big enough to fill an entire city. He gets a notification that tells him that he must defeat the Dark Shadow Warrior ETHALT. The PROTA quickly draws his sword and shield because that notification gave the signal that the fight had already begun. The lizard stops and the PROTA thinks that being a dark warrior it was likely that he would not make a first move. He realizes how his enemy only observes him and that by his posture he will not be a common enemy, because his aura is different. PROTA thinks that it is his first time seeing such a cautious enemy. The distance between them is very wide and he does not want to hurry. He scolds himself for being so nervous and realizes that by the posture they both have their abilities are similar, giving him to think that at least he is not overwhelmingly powerful. The PROTA, seeing his face, realizes that it seems to be made of stone, but thinks that it doesn't make sense since it was a monster, although he was eager to check it out. When the battle is about to begin, the lizard woman asks the PROTA about why she rejects him. He answers her if there is any reason not to do so, followed by telling her crazy lizard. The woman tells him that that is going too far and that it is wrong to judge others based on how they look. The PROTA thinks that she had not said something about her appearance and that it seemed that even in her own species she is not particularly attractive. He tells himself that he should concentrate because that Idalta is different from the other lizard men. You only had to see her strength, speed, the way she gripped her spear, and the way she approached a fight. It was something completely different from what the PROTA knew. The lizard woman, instead of rushing in aggressively like the other lizard men, she moved carefully and efficiently. After having dodged her opponent's attack calmly, she launches a counter-attack with that opening. That incredible reaction speed allows her to dodge with just a blink of an eye and attack. Plus she has an ability that allows her to vaporize her body and launch a barrage of physical attacks. The PROTA thinks that she may have an ability that simply increases her reaction speed or her cognition, and the vaporization ability with her self-evasion may be an extra improvement. But her vaporization ability also has something extra, and that is that it has an incredibly short duration. The PROTA gives her a blow with his sword and analyzes that she could dodge it, but she only received the onslaught with the shield in the face, which gives her to seem that it is not possible to use it continuously, similar to the blink of an eye. The PROTA thinks about forcing her to use her vaporization ability with normal attacks, then use the blink and wings to finish with a combo. They are battling and the lizard woman tells the PROTA that he really is someone cruel, but if that is how he will be, she will use her brute strength to keep him by her side. Immediately the PROTA thinks if she is also a Yandere and how many types of character she has inside. She runs to attack him and the PROTA thinks that if she is blinded by anger it is a blessing for him that she enters like this from the front. He thinks that her vigor is incredible and that he will not be able to stop her from the front, so he activates his power of concentration and manifests to the lizard woman to test him, trying to stab him. The lizard woman breaks the shield of the PROTA with her triton. The PROTA cuts her hand and part of the arm with which the woman was holding her weapon. She tries to attack him and he uses his blink power to push her away. She cries for the loss of her arm and he thinks that they only exchanged a few blows. Besides, she didn't use her vaporization ability, so things didn't go according to his plan. But seeing the results, she had ended up suffering more, because he launched his attack thinking that he was going to lose his arm and he succeeded. She screams at him that he is too cruel, and that she saw his intentions to kill her. If she had dodged a little later, it would not have been her arm, but her head would have been cut off. She tells him that if this is how he will act, she will not see him as a partner but as an enemy that he must kill. She starts to get bigger and stronger. The PROTA is amazed by what he had just seen. He thinks if this is the beginning of the second phase and the lizard woman gives a strong step that breaks part of the floor, the battle begins. She stomps again and the PROTA thinks that she could destroy the room, and by the appearance more corpulent his enemy looks like a boss monster of the game. She runs to attack him and manages to push him against a wall. He thinks about how long she can have that form because he has already used blink many times and he only has 2 charges left. She throws a fireball that he manages to dodge by ducking. The PROTA runs out with his sword. From this comes out a blue energy, and when he is close the lizard woman stabs it in his abs. He spreads his wings and she throws a fireball towards them. The PROTA thinks he could die but he does not give up and draws a great inner strength that allows him to fly high. Back on the ground he comments to his enemy how strong he is. She tells him if he had come this far to change his mind, and he asks her to give him some time. The lizard woman asks him what he means by give him time. The PROTA thinks that the woman who was jumping on him before was only calmed down by him telling her that he was going to think about it. He keeps thinking if he is a beauty in the eyes of the lizard people. He tells the lizard woman to give him a moment and thinks that he managed to stop her for quite some time. But he thinks that she is crazy and he doesn't know when she will attack him again. He quickly takes out his board and grabs the recovery and stamina positions. He drinks them and the woman asks him if he is done thinking. He tells her to please give him a little more time since he needed to take up energy to concentrate on his thoughts. He takes out his sword and starts to repeat himself to concentrate. He thinks of an ability that had a 90% chance of failure even when he was training in the waiting room. If he fails, she will counterattack immediately. The PROTA thinks that using Blink offensively was quite costly. He didn't think he would have to use it together with the wings of Teleria, but he has another trick up his sleeve. He thinks about the way he holds his weapon, but just using flicker to make his sword reach the opponent is not enough. If he only does that, using the wings is a better option. So he must use flicker and blade together. The speed in which he carries his sword and the speed in which he goes out with flicker. If he puts those two together, he can go against his enemy in high speed and cut her. The PROTA goes against her and shouts blinking orb, cutting her in half, activates his wings, and when he is close to her he cuts her neck, lands, and falls near the tail of the lizard woman, who grabs his leg and knocks him to the ground. The blow was so big that the PROTA can't get up. He raises his head and wonders if he had defeated his enemy and crawls to see if he was right. He sees the lizard woman and bloodied and with her tongue out of her mouth, so he thinks that somehow he managed to survive. He thinks that it has been a long time since he swam in the Styx and that his body doesn't move well. He thinks that he should use a potion, but thinks that he should just enter the portal and use Blink, but realizes that usually when he completes a boss room he would recover immediately. He thinks that the message that he had completed the room has not appeared. He comes out of his thoughts when he hears the lizard woman telling him that he is a very cruel and horrible human. He sees her slowly crawling away and the PROTA thinks about how crazy she is. He thinks about the lizard woman's sex drive and that she has overcome just being focused on her suitor. He is still shocked by that and that only he can move a little, plus Flicker is still in confrontation. His wings with Teleria, but not his gun. He thinks about the gun he gave Park Yona and how useful it would be if he had it. He comes out of his thoughts when he sees the lizard woman approach and tell him that she will make him her husband. He thinks about the possibility of biting his tongue and dying, but realizes that this is not the time to do that. As the PROTA watches as the lizard woman approaches and tells him that she will make him her husband, he wonders why she will be so obsessed with him. He tells himself that he should concentrate and pulls out his board to see how his player status is. He notices that Flicker is still on cooldown, but he can still use the Teleria wings. He can move his hands and his brain is still working fine. He sees a heat stone option and wonders if that might work, as lizard people are still reptiles after all and they are cold-blooded. He thinks about reptiles being extremely weak to temperature changes, so he pulls the stone off the board and yells at the lizard woman to get close to him if she can, as he will shove the fireball down her throat. She keeps approaching him and comments that her husband will do it. He tells her that she is annoying and being on the verge of death, she wonders how that is the only thing she can say. That makes her upset. She raises her hand and slams it on the ground. She stands still and the PROTA thinks about how she stopped moving. He wonders if she must have run out of strength as he hears her coughing. He approaches and she tells him that he told her that she was strong. He never called her despicable or cowardly, nor did he curse her as a servant of the devil. She tells him that he recognized her and that Iswila is his other half. Even though he is a despicable little human, he was a strong male and tries to say that is why he would make him her husband, but the prayer goes as far as making him her. The PROTA wonders if she really died as the lizard woman is no longer talking or moving. He thinks about how she was getting scared and she wakes up telling him he is an idiot. He asks her if he was ever rejected by his kind. She tells him that, with a strange ability, the defensive nature that was long ago removed from a lizard man's instincts and sadness. The PROTA asks him if that is why she was happy when he said something good to her. He tells her that he feels a small taste of bittersweetness and guilt. But even if she had some kind of sad story, they were destined to kill each other. He apologizes and into her mouth he puts the heat stone he had been hiding in his hand. At that moment he gets a notification saying that he has completed the 5th floor of the tutorial Hell difficulty. Another notification comes saying that all status abnormalities and wounds will be healed. Another notification comes saying that he has gained 1000 points as a reward for completing for the first time. Another notification comes saying that he has completed consecutive revenge floors in a single session, and for that he has gained 1.000 points as an extra reward. Two other notifications appear. One says that many gods have a negative view of him and that 3,200 points will be lowered. But the other notification says that many gods have a positive view of him, and that is why he has earned 4,700 points. The PROTA thinks that he has completed the 5th floor, and that a notification appears saying that with his player history as a base he will be given additional rewards. Another notification appears saying that many gods have suggested giving him a special skill instead of an additional reward. 74 gods in favor of that and 3 against. A notification appears asking him if he will approve that. He thinks that there is something complicated and that there is definitely something behind that. Since a gift from so many gods, it has to be different from an authority skill. The PROTA thinks that the last skill he got that way was wisdom from before the time of Babel. It is a good skill, but he has been starting to have more thoughts after talking to the monsters. He thinks about the probability that the gods are giving him gifts as a test and that they are enjoying his reactions as a result, as he doesn't think they are giving him a gift to help him. He realizes that there are more gods in favor than when he received the wisdom from before Babel times, and he thinks it is because that many gods want to give him that new ability. The PROTA is anxious about the decision he must make. If he rejects the ability, the impression the gods will have of him may do much more. That ability may be unexpectedly good, so he accepts the ability and he gets a notification saying he has achieved summoning the deceased, but it does not tell him what level. He gets a notification describing that the authority of an unknown god who refused to reveal his identity to the challenger. That ability can be used on an object which has the soul of the deceased imprinted on it as a means to revive them for a period of time. That is an authority constrained by a god. He has 5 uses remaining, and as an extra bonus the god of slowness was worried about him. The PROTA thinks about how amazing it is to be able to revive a dead person. Sarcastically, he thinks about how it's better to forget the game skills, as his new ability was at a miracle level. He thinks about if it was okay for something as amazing as that to appear, and wonders on if it's not completely related to the 5th floor. A green light with a yellow diamond appears above the lizard. He is given the explanation that it is the soul stone of the lizard woman Idalta, the soul stone of the strongest and the most powerful warrior among the lizard men inhabiting the Aden swamp. That stone could sell it in the store window. After reading that, the PROTA wonders if that is not telling him that he should revive Idalta, because if he does that she will start saying that he is her husband and will come for him. He wonders if they think he is crazy enough to dig his own grave. A notification arrives saying that the god of adventure feels sorry for that actions. The god of dedication has resentment towards him. The god of chaos feels bored and the god of combat condemns him strongly. The PROTA thinks he should just ignore that and a portal opens. He thinks from any point of view all those gods have a screw loose. So he enters the portal and falls into a field where Kirikiri tells him that trampling on a woman's heart is a very cruel thing to do. Then he tells her to stop and asks her if she wanted to see him mate with a lizard woman. She tells him to pass, and in the place where he was before 2 notifications appear. The first one says to please designate the members of his group before entering the 6th stage. And the second notification shows him the current group members where out of 5 people the first one is him. While the PROTA and Kirikiri eat cake, she tells him that he is probably the first one to have been courted by the 5th floor guardian. She tells him that the reason the gods were interested out of the blue in him was because of a rare event like that. He asks her if she is treating his virginity as a joke, but she tells him to forget that and that there is something he wants to know. He tells her that he has been thinking about it since before, but after the 5th floor he seems more certain. She tells him she can't tell him that and wonders if now Kirikiri is reading his mind too. He remembers that the goblins and lizard men have their own cultures and societies, whether on another planet or dimension. They have their own worlds or if they were created based on an existing world, and for those worlds there is some tutorial happening outside the Earth too. He tells her that he has managed to understand that after seeing her attitude. The POTRA tries to tell her what he thinks are the monsters that have appeared on Earth, but seeing that she is silent without wanting to answer his doubts, he tells her that he won't say anything more. Kirikiri tells him that he was just saying his own conjectures, so it doesn't matter. But if he tries to get information based on her reactions, she will start acting differently too. He tells her that he understands and thinks that something like that is what happened the other time. He remembers when he asked her what happened to the people who died there and she didn't answer him, but changed her expression. He thinks that she should have warned him on the extra level, out of her good intention. He thinks that Kirikiri will always give him information that will help him, and trying to take advantage of a child's good intention is not good, so he apologizes to her. When they finish eating, they get up from the table and Kirikiri sees how the PROTA goes to a doorway. She asks him why he doesn't think about it a little longer, and he asks her if she was talking seriously. She tells him that she will never know if Idalta can become a good partner and tries to tell him a negotiation that he could make with her if he tries to convince her. But the PROTA interrupts her, telling her that he has no interest in negotiating with her. He tells her that getting her to calm down is impossible in the first place. So he tells her that he will go and buy an item next time after getting some points. He tells himself about changing his shield for a better one, but he doesn't have enough points to do so. So he will have to get over the 6th floor and get more points. Kirikiri tells him to at least buy a potion. He tells her he has enough, and she tells him she doesn't think he has enough. She asks him if he will need many items on the 6th floor and ends up using the remaining points to buy more items. They say goodbye and she tells him to take care of himself. She also tells him that he better come back quickly, although she doubts that this will happen. The PROTA wonders how difficult can be the 6th floor, but the answer is given immediately by himself when he realizes that it is something that he has to discover. He arrives to the 6th floor and sees the notification that he must designate the members of his group before entering the 6th stage. He sees that in the part where it says the current members of the group there is only him and there must be 5 people. The PROTA realizes that out of nowhere he needs a group of 5 people, and that was crazy. He wonders where he will get people to put it together. Forming a group with a challenger of a different skill level would be impossible, and would only be possible with a challenger from the 6th floor in a difficulty of hell. The PROTA tells the system that he is unique in the hell difficulty to begin with, and that, although the system has no conscience, that situation is being too much. Sarcastically, he asks the board if he really thought that 5 people will survive to the 6th floor of hell. It was a mistake in an obvious way, and asks him if that was designed by the gods, since they are the only crazy ones who watch what the challengers do and talk about it all day long. The PROTA, what was he supposed to expect from them? And into his mind comes the memory of Idalta, that he can revive her, but he refuses to do that, and in that comes a notification that the god of adventure was disappointed in him. The PROTA tells the board to shut up and asks him if he watches it all day or what. He imagines the god of adventure as a fat old bald man with a white blanket, and that he was surely a lewd person. A notification pops up telling him that the god of adventure has been very surprised and he is shocked by his thoughts. The PROTA wonders what he is supposed to do about his fate at that point in the tutorial, as he is the one who is to blame for choosing the hell difficulty without thinking about it too. He remembers there was a case where a co-opus player would appear on the 6th floor on the hard difficulty. He thinks about the fact that group play was affected by so many challengers. There are people who worked hard to get there, and some people started discussing weapon or growth decisions. But still everyone died on the 1st floor, so the PROTA didn't understand how come he needed a group there. The members board keeps appearing there, and below is a button where it tells him whether he will enter yes or no. The PROTA thinks that the option to enter alone is a good thing, but he will have to do the work of 5 people and complete it by himself. He falls that it is an easy thing to say, but he is in the difficulty of hell, and doing the work of 5 men would not be easy at all. He thinks that if there were other challengers he could not compare himself with them, as he would definitely be above average, or at least that was what his confidence was telling him. He remembers that Kirikiri told him that he can get a special authority skill because of the specialties that the god of slowness has. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have managed to get that authority in the first place. He thinks it's okay, because the god of adventure granted him an authority because he felt nervous that the god of slowness gave him one. The PROTA had never felt that his skills were not enough after getting used to battles. His judgment, creativity, concentration, response, adaptability, reaction speed, perseverance, and tenacity. He had become stronger in every aspect, but still he wondered if he was able to do the job of 5 men in the difficulty of hell. He thinks to test it and presses the button that if he entered, he falls into a room where there is a small fire and a notice welcoming him to the 6th floor. Being in the room, the PROTA quickly details that there is a bonfire and 2 portals. He deduces that one must be to return to the waiting room, and in the other there is a notification asking him if he wants to challenge the test set. He remembers that he had heard in the community that there was a floor like this. They said that the whole floor was connected to a single test. That place was the one they called Bonfire Room. It is a space for team members to meet and discuss tactics to challenge that scenario. Many were interested in that place due to the fact that it was a safe area, and also had a magical campfire. Something especially interesting was the campfire fire, which would never spread or go out. Plus, it also does not produce smoke. The PROTA remembers that they said you could even cook if you bought the ingredients from the store menu. There was even a challenger who wanted to stay and live in the campfire room. The PROTA wonders if he should cook something, but tells himself that this is not the time for that and that he'd better cook the next time he's there. He decides to enter the portal where the notification is asking him if he wants to challenge the test set, and he presses the yes button. He falls into a corridor and thinks he is on the 6th floor, although it looks very similar to the corridor on the 1st floor. He walks and realizes that instead of a portal there is a stone door, which has a notification telling him that he cannot leave, and wonders how that door is the exit. At that moment, a notification arrives telling him that the test on the 6th floor has already started, and when he approaches he sees another notification of this one written the explanation of that test. Read that 50 years ago, since the cursed priests of the Bahar Church were chased from the pantheon. The church was a cult that revived the dead and turned souls into evil spirits, including Kijas. There were 16 priests. The persecuted ones were able to escape the hunt from the pantheon by taking refuge there, in the center of the White Mountains. The center of the White Mountains was once known as New World in the past. It is said to be a place where a god resided. The priests of the Bahar Church were trying to use the divinity fragments to plunge the continent into nightmares. The PROTA reads a message that says, "O brave warriors, until the holy knights of the pantheon arrive, you are the only ones who can stop them." As he finishes reading it, he thinks about how the brave warriors takes away all the seriousness and makes it sound ridiculous. A notice appears with the conditions to achieve success. The first one says that until the order of the holy knights arrives, the forces of death must be prevented from escaping from the White Mountains. The second one says that the forces of death must be overthrown and the 16 priests must be disposed of. The PROTA tells himself that he must only prevent the forces of death from reaching the stone door. He wonders if he must kill them all, including the priests. He stops thinking when many skeletons appear with capes, skirts, and swords marching at the same pace. The PROTA is surprised by the number of skeletons he sees and realizes that for their march to sound so loud there must be many of them. The PROTA thinks that they do not look very strong as individual opponents, and that if he makes good use of that narrow corridor there would not be too much danger. Although there were many skeletons, he thinks that if the priests are necromancers, then the creation of those skeletons will not stop and they will keep coming one after another. The PROTA thinks that he will have to take care of those guys at a rate of speed exponentially faster than the rate of creation of skeletons. The PROTA remembers why Kirakiri told him that it would take him more time to return and thinks that no doubt that level is above his estimated level to pass for sure. He thinks that the biggest problems will be his stamina and his speed to be able to take care of those skeletons. Besides not being able to clear this for the 3rd session in 2 days, and it could even take him until the 5th session. He spreads his wings as he thinks that because of his size with them he will be able to block the corridor. There will not be a way for them to continue their march towards the stone door. The skeletons are approaching and he is hitting them until he realizes that their weak points are their skulls. If the skulls are not destroyed they continue moving. He also realizes that some skeletons are well equipped with helmets and carved armor. He deduces that those are the commanders, and out of nowhere appear more skeletons with red cloaks and red eyes. The PROTA goes backwards until he reaches the door. He falls into despair when he sees the point he was taken to, and that no matter how many skeletons he kills, they keep coming one after another without end. Even if he wants to kill the priests, so far he had seen no trace of them. After 2 days of constant fighting, the raid to the 6th floor ended as a failure. There is a pause in the story and the PROTA is in a room where there is an egg in the center of a pillow that has a glass capsule around it. There are wires connected to that capsule and around it sounds a melody. When he finishes wiping the capsule, the PROTA comments that he had already finished with the preparations, that he must do other things and needs more time. But if he keeps an eye on the egg, the dragon egg will hatch. Everything was already prepared for after it hatches. The first thing he will do is bathe it in elixir and give it the blessing that will give it a variety of stamina abilities. The dragon will drink diluted elixir and eat ground spiritual byproducts and large worms. The PROTA already had the giant mixer ready for the baby's food. Once it grows up a little, he will give it fairy larvae, because he had learned about magic, and in case the dragon is born and does not accept him as a father, he says that he has already prepared the dragon's heart so it will not feel uncomfortable because of its appearance. Thanks to a person he was able to learn a lot about reptiles. Suddenly he gets a call from Kim Min Hyuk, and when he answers he tells him that he is calling him to say goodbye before he leaves. PROTA tells him that he thought he was just going to be locked up living there. and that he will finally leave. His friend replies that he plans to go out and live a quiet life, to which Prota replies that he is sure he will make it. His friend tells him that he doesn't think Prota is going to be running around killing the monsters that appeared on Earth. The Korean server that adopted one of the strongest alarm clocks. Prota had been one of the pioneers of that server. Prota asks him that if he were to stay in Korea he would receive some kind of national merit, as he would have a say in political matters too, so they might not let him live a quiet life. The Prota tells him that, if there was ever a day of the big conference, he would have gone to greet him in person before he left, and his friend replies that he was sick of the big conference, to which the Potra tells him that he has forgotten that at first it was a pretty fun event. And his friend tells him that it was because he wasn't doing any work, unlike him who had to work very hard. He tells him that he was just standing in a corner hurting himself to raise his resistances, but somehow he did help a lot. The Prota tells him that it looks like the conference would happen again very soon, and his friend asks him if he was serious. The Prota asks him if he did not know, and his friend replies that it has been a long time since he stopped managing the civil militia. He asks him if Park Young-a knows about the meeting, and the Prota tells him that he thinks so. His friend tells him that by that answer he thinks the meeting will not happen, as the big conference only happens when there is a serious problem in the tutorial. If the information about the big conference was leaked, the civilian militia should be on the move, as Park Young-a likes to nip problems in the bud. Prota tells him that then the next big conference will happen sometime after she completes the tutorial. His friend laughs and asks him if anything has changed between him and Park Young-a. Prota tells him that things are still the same and asks him why he is curious. His friend tells him that he thought it was time for them to get along, and Prota tells him that nothing will change as long as he stays locked up where he is. His friend tells him that, if he leaves, the only person he will be able to talk comfortably with Park Young-a is him, and that he should help her. The Prota tells him that now he should be worrying about other people, and his friend tells him that he shouldn't behave like that. He still thinks that the girl likes him. The Potra tells him that he probably said the same thing to the girl, and his friend says no. Then the Prota tells him that he will send her a message and check. He asks him if that was okay, and his friend says that he should do whatever he wants. At that, his friend asks him if he really asked her because she was cursing him, and tells him that there are some lines that he should not cross, because it seems that he has no common sense. The Prota laughs, and his friend asks him what is funny, besides asking him if he was drugged. The Prota tells him that his resistance is too much of a drag to be drugged, and tells him that he will talk to Park Young-a later. His friend tells him that if the big conference were to happen he could meet the new guy. He asks him if he is still on the 6th floor, and the Prota tells him yes. His friend asks him if he was not excited, and he tells him that he should not be that excited as there are not many that made it that far. His friend tells him that he should not be that tough as the guy looks like he is good, to which the Prota replies that no one is as good as he is. His friend tells him that he is really strong, but that the new guy looked very compromising, and asks him if he thinks that a rookie can overcome the 6th floor. The Prota tells him that being an archer they might not make it, but if they are given some objects they might, since the first 10 floors can be overcome with the right equipment. If they were lucky they could get to the 30v0 floor like the Americans. His friend asks him how strong he was, and the Prota asks him why he wants to know. He tells him that when he leaves many people will ask him. He asks him again how strong he is compared to a G-rank monster. In the real world people have ranks of monsters to classify them. In the beginning it was from A to F, S was added recently, and G after that. G-rank monster is a nationwide threat, and there are 4 G-rank monsters currently on Earth. Once a G-rank claims their territory they don't go away. A G-rank monster named Ochlora took over New York. Then the United States confronted him. At that time the strongest awakened armies in the world were mobilized. They defeated Ochlora in the end, but there were casualties, including half of the most powerful awakened in the world. Those were the things that were heard from the new ones in the tutorial. Those who were there from the beginning have never seen such monsters. Prota tells him that based on the information he has about those monsters he thinks it is enough. His friend thanks him for such a simple answer that feels like he has heard it before. They both laugh and end up talking about the past, from the time they met, the hardships and the funny moments they had lived together. The Prota tells that he met Kim Min-hyuk a few times during the big conference. But those moments are precious memories for him, since he had been alone in the hardship of hell for all that time. He was one of his few friends and family. Even if his friend leaves it doesn't change the fact that he can't see him. It just means that he won't be able to contact him through messages. His friend says goodbye, telling him that he will leave first and see him outside. But for the PROTA, that felt like a goodbye forever. He asks him to greet the people outside for him and thinks that he should leave too. He thinks that he was getting worried and leaves a note that says, "Greet Kirikiri for me." Back to reality, the PROTA wakes up from a dream in which he had fallen. Around him there are some marble walls like from Olympus, and he realizes that he had had his first defeat. He had failed to complete the 6th floor, and at the same time, he finished round 3. The 4th round had started and the PROTA wanted to try again. But the chances of completing it were low. He thinks that he had experienced death countless times from the 2nd floor, but he had never felt so defeated as that time. He thinks about how possible it is to complete it, how it is similar to the time he wanted to retire, when he had lost his cousin's skills, that is, when he was at his best, his most powerful stage, and all for losing to a novice player. He thinks that when he returned to that place he regained his main ability, but now his weak back, neck pain and slow reflexes had returned to how he was in his prime. He had become a superhuman as he leveled up, but now he had lost. The PROTA was in a complete defeat. The newly arrived people in the tutorial came with news, and that was that the Chungcheong region of Korea was completely destroyed. All the people in the tutorial and the PROTA were shocked after hearing that news. The challengers were troubled by the news that the new ones brought. Chungcheong had been destroyed, but the areas outside that zone were doing well. Perhaps because things were going relatively well in Korea, according to the news. It seems that they had placed defense lines in the north and south of Chungcheong to prevent the monsters from spreading out of the city. That was not enough to give calm to anyone, but to hear that Korea was relatively well, it was certain that other countries were out of danger. In the 4th session there was an uproar in the tutorial. When the session started, Park Young started a war against the old Rep Guild members. The reason why there were signs that they were becoming active again. The PROTA tells himself that he didn't think they would have anything in mind after seeing something so horrible on the day of the big conference, and also since the civilian militia is still active. The war had ended quickly. According to what PROTA had heard, 8 people were purged and Park Young had personally blown the brains out of one of them. By that action, the issue of whether she would continue to lead the civil militia became a hotly debated topic. PROTA didn't know what to think, as she could become a brutal killer or a judge acting purely for justice. He thought that as long as she didn't cross the line he shouldn't meddle. What he did know is that if things became serious, a big conference they would have to start. The PROTA thinks that, if one day of the big conference ends up happening because of her, he will just have to do exactly the same thing he did last time. Think about that. Kim Min-hyuk has also been keeping busy helping new people adjust faster. He created a guide and shared it with most of the community. He also created a system of gifts and exchanges using the auction window. The rule is that any items that cost 7 or 77 points are for individuals, so you should not bid on them. It is a simple rule, but very effective. Helping newcomers is a fact, but it will motivate exchanges between people as well. Until now, the auction window was mainly used for rankers to sell items they don't need cheaply. There wasn't much being traded most of the time. Since there were not enough points, they had to be auctioned at low prices. While Park Young was becoming more alert to crimes, Kim Min-hyuk was working to develop an environment where people could communicate easily. He wanted to establish a society and culture in the tutorial. He wanted to make it a pleasant place for people in every way he could. Instead of the few people on the 100th floor, he said that it is more important to concentrate on the environment around the people who will be on the lower floors. According to PROTA, that thought was not wrong because many people were left behind. A way for weak people was the answer that Kim Min-hyuk found. In the past few days, PROTA had not been playing alone. He had his own job. As the 4th session began, the rookies had reached hell difficulty. One had chosen the wrong option while drunk and the other had just waved his hand in the air as if it meant nothing, which seemed stupid to the PROTA, as he thought that his companions in the first session had chosen that level by choice. They wanted to do that level, although the PROTA was the only one to survive. Still, PROTA taught the newbies everything he knew about the difficulty hell, taught them how to avoid and gave them growth guides of different types. The PROTA was giving them lessons from the community board, when he explained that for now the important thing was to overcome the first trap. They had agreed to contact each other when they were in the waiting room and tells them that soon they should receive a message. The rookie who had chosen the hell level as anything was nervous as he was dodging the arrows, as they were very fast and he could not see them. The PROTA asks him what he means by not being able to see them, and the man replies that he had somehow managed to survive when he had fallen by accident, and asks the PROTA what he was supposed to do against something like that. At the end of the day, one of them could not get back and the other had gone crazy. The PROTA was disappointed, as he had gone out of his way to teach them, although deep down he had expected something like that to happen. Stressed by the situation, the PROTA wonders what he is supposed to do to save the people who end up in the hell difficulty. The POTRA explains to the one who had gone crazy to stay waiting in the waiting room. When the waiting time is over, he tells him to try to hold it in front of the portal. The PROTA tells him that he will send him food in the next session. But the last one gave up on challenging him, and the POTRA came to the conclusion that humans are very mentally weak beings. The guy would have to stay 30 days in the portal eating dried meat and water. Then he would stay a few days in the waiting room and then another 30 days in front of the portal. He might have to spend his whole life that way. Kim Min-hyuk was working to bring other challengers from the lower floors to the higher floors, but when it comes to the difficulty hell, it was all in vain. The PROTA thinks that there is nothing more to do and he must walk his own destiny. He arrives at the campfire room and thinks about how the 6th floor must be completed while eating some marshmallows. From his pocket he takes out 3 gems. A pink one which was the birth gem of the goblin Gractus, a purple gem which was the birth gem of the goblin Goros, and lastly the yellow gem was the soul stone of the lizard woman Idalta. The PROTA thinks that, if he uses the ability to summon the deceased, he can get 3 comrades, although he doesn't know if they would work as his comrades. But if he managed to convince them somehow, it might work his plan. He would end up with a team. They could split into 3 teams and could take turns fighting, so they could conserve their stamina and add another member when in danger. Without commander appears, the extra member can go specifically to take care of him. And if the PROTA was alone, he couldn't stop the walking skeleton soldiers while defeating the commander. If all 4 worked together to complete the floor, their plan could work. If the PROTA considered the width of the bridge, the strategy could work. The ability to summon the deceased was definitely useful. It might be believable if he told them that the gods gave it to him to complete the 6th floor. But the part in the indications of that ability where it said that a period of time was set was something that PROTA was concerned about. It just meant that when a good amount of time passed, the people he had summoned could disappear. The PROTA thinks that more floors will appear where they demand teamwork, even if he completes that floor. At any moment he would run into a wall. Getting temporary mercenaries to get past the 6th floor was not the answer for the PROTA, so he considers that, if he keeps thinking about it in the long run, the right answer was to become strong enough to replace 5 people. He thinks about going back and trying not to die, challenging the floors while barely avoiding death, and he will just keep going on and on and on. He thinks about not giving up no matter how many times it takes. The POTRA thinks that with that system his levels and skills will grow as long as he keeps challenging the floor. It's different from the real world, where you just destroy your body by working too hard. Since there is a waiting room, there is no reason for him to worry about accumulating fatigue and pain. It is the perfect environment for him to concentrate on his growth. The PROTA thinks that for the time being it is best to postpone the floor raid. Even if he uses some tricks, he will only end up hitting a brick wall on the next floor, and in the end, the only way to victory is to concentrate on his growth without rest. A portal opens and he thinks that if he fails he just has to go back to the waiting room. He just has to avoid dying and throws himself into the portal. He spreads his wings and sees all the skeleton troop from the first time. He repeats to himself that as he becomes more proficient, his level and skills will grow as well. The waiting room will allow him to recover completely. If he has a strong enough will, he will manage to climb any wall. The PROTA comes to the conclusion that the tutorial world is like an RPG in many ways, and that there is nothing that cannot be achieved with enough effort. He must show them the tenacity and persistence of a gamer, reaching level 20 by now. The 4th session ends and the raid to the 6th floor fails. In the waiting room is a girl with blue hair and purple eyes eating a chocolate bar while reading chat in the community. She reads that someone asks about why she wouldn't listen to him, and they reply that her death is because she didn't listen. The girl says that what she reads is from 8 years ago and she has read all the old stuff. She thinks that the waiting time is boring and she wants to go to the stage already. Her resistances and skill levels don't go up well when she is in the waiting room, and she thinks that Augusty didn't say she had to do it anyway. Currently in the 6th floor challenge of hell difficulty, the girl thinks that by looking at those old messages she can learn more or less a little bit about the history of the Korean servers. She thinks about Augusty and how at first he was treated as a liar, but soon after he ended up as one of the highest rankers and one of the strongest in the tutorial. She thinks about how he really was amazing and that she knew about him before she entered the tutorial. Augusty was the only survivor of the hell difficulty of the Korean server and the strongest challenger. Or at least that's what everyone says about him in the real world. Augusty, or rather, Lee Ho-yi, was a former pro gamer. Tons of reports about his past started to come out, and also tabloids started to be printed about him. Yet the girl knew about him when she saw him on TV while watching her little sister watching him. She was the one who told her that he was a pro gamer. At that time she thought he looked too good to be a pro gamer and should rather be an actor. But she never thought about him again, and now it was ironic that he was her daddy long legs, her guide in that world. That girl had entered the hell difficulty by mistake. But he had given her hope. He was her support, and without him she would have died. She comes out of her thoughts when she gets a notification asking her if she was ready and sees a call from Park Young. She realizes that she was the one who sent him the notification and that it was probably accidental. The girl answers and asks if something had happened, to which Park Young replies no. But that Appa had asked her to say goodbye. She wonders who the heck Appa is and thinks he means Augusty, as she has never called someone Appa before. She thinks about the rest of the community talking comfortably amongst themselves and even cursing each other. She hears Park Young tell her that she is going to get some points on the 61st floor. But the girl is still thinking about who Appa is because she has never heard anyone say that name before, and she starts to feel worried. Park Young reminds her to tell her manager, and the girl thinks that Park Young is a bit abrupt, even a little hostile. She wonders if she called him Appa on purpose and replies to Park Young that if she remembers about her manager. From her mouth she quotes a girl like "you shouldn't meddle" and asks if it's something like that. She opens a portal, takes her bow and arrow, and tells herself that it's time to start the raid. When she enters, she arrives at the campfire room and a notification appears welcoming her to the 6th floor phase. She thinks that Augusty did not teach her everything about that phase. He said that, if she does not die instantly due to lack of knowledge, it was important to know how to acquire and use information. The girl agrees with that thought and remembers that the 6th floor has an endless army of skeletons. She must fight against the priests that create them. She remembers that there is also a method of holding out until the holy knights arrive there, but it is impossible to hold out against the amount of soldiers coming. She stops thinking and decides to enter the battle. She runs down the corridor and realizes that speed is vital on that floor. She summons a high-level magic stone and a potion of concentrated magic power, uses them by summoning the Fantu skill, and makes herself a kind of magic trap on the floor. Jumps from one end to the other after summoning the Sil style skill and realizes that using magic to fly there is much easier. Unlike Augusty, the girl has no wings, but uses positions to be able to fly. The girl decides to set several magic traps and arrives at the beginning of the corridor. She tells herself that she must draw an explosive magic circle in the middle and just memorize the route. She uses her perception ability to see where the skeletons are and realizes that they are far away. She goes through the corridors and starts repeating a pattern. She starts left 3 times, right 2 times, left 6 times, and that's how she memorizes the route. She stands behind a wall and sees the skeletons approaching. She tells herself that it is time to kill, and invokes the ability Data Spill Kion. Her cloak begins to glow and repeats spiritual magic that can make me fly, and give me invisibility. The cloak gives her the ability to move on the roof, and that's how she dodges the skeletons. The girl reaches the 16 priests and sees how a skeleton is transformed. She thinks that they will attack her the moment they see her, and at most she will last 6 seconds. That is her limit. So she starts shooting arrows from her bow that, thanks to her good aim, reach directly to the skull of a priest. She invokes the battle concentration skill and starts shooting arrows that fall to 3 priests. Suddenly one of them takes out from each hand 2 fireballs, and the ones she had not been able to attack come closer to scare her. She invokes the Fantalarka skill and is teleported to the starting place where she had made a magic portal. She thinks that she was lucky to escape, but she has used a lot of high-level magic in a short time and she is running in the fumes there. However, she thinks she has done well that time and lies down on the ground because of how exhausted she is. But she tells herself that her story of survival in the difficulty of hell will have to continue. It is the 8th day of the 5th session in the history of POTRA. He gets the welcome notification again about the 6th floor phase and how the test was about to start. He thinks that it will be at least 2 hours before the skeleton soldiers show up. He thinks that he is on a path that only wastes his time and wonders if he should raise his resistances. But he thinks that it is better not to do it since he is not guaranteed that he will be able to heal by the time of the battle. He can't use potions every time either. He wonders if he should do some exercise and starts to do a series of burpees. That series of exercises makes him a little tired and he realizes that it was being more difficult than he thought. because he had stopped exercising since his body surpassed that of a non-normal human. He thinks that climbing the resistances is like running in the same place, so doing some basic exercise can be effective. However, he is forced to stop at the moment when he hears the skeletons approaching, so he says to himself that it is time to work. He cuts off the skulls of the skeletons that are approaching him because that is how they stop walking. He receives a notification telling him that he has leveled up. His strength has increased by 1 point, as well as his stamina, his magic power, the shield arts skill, and the melee skill. But another notification appears telling him that he had failed the 6th floor test. Remember how someone once asked a muscular, blonde-haired, high-ranking player of a popular RPG game if it didn't get boring to hunt every day? The player answered his question with another question. He asked him if living gets boring, and when he got no answer, the player started to relate that life is a routine. He found himself doing what he liked every day, and it didn't get boring. The man tells him that's a smart answer. The PROTA remembers that he did not become a professional player because he liked a specific game, but because he liked to win, so he concentrated on a single game to become a professional. That is why he did not get bored of playing the same game, but he would like to ask that high-ranking player how he did not get bored. The PROTA keeps cutting heads while fighting with the tiredness of seeing the faces of the skeletons, the sounds they made, how they move their swords the same way every time, and feeling pain for those rusty swords. He says he is getting tired, but he must go on, because there are still good things about it. Swinging his sword had become ingrained in his body, as swinging his sword the same way in the same situations so many times had caused him to develop a sword style that he had become familiar with, which had caused his sword skill to increase. A notification appeared telling him that he had achieved level 10 in basic sword skills, and had also moved up to level 7 in basic shield arts. But, even so, the 6th floor was not getting any easier, and again a notification appears telling him that he had failed the 6th floor test. The POTRA thinks about how as he leveled up through concentration in combat, his cognition also grew faster as a result. He has the memory of when he got the notification that he had leveled up to level 13 in battle concentration. He thinks about how his opponent's movements had become slower, but he had improved to the point where it seems like time stood still. He can only get to that level of concentration for a brief moment, but he has many opportunities to grow, and he is reminded of it by how he has leveled up in different areas. The PROTA makes a war cry that due to its intensity rises to level 2. That cry stuns the skeletons, and it is remembered that, in most games, tank characters have that ability. As a result, their combat value will increase a little, although it is not certain how much. He arrives at the priests and they tell him that death will fall upon him. They point out to him an Azd, who is a knight of death, and tell him that he will be the one who will take him to rest eternally. The bosses began to appear a little further inside. At first they had deceived the PROTA, making him believe that this knight was the final boss. But when he realizes that it is not so, he insults them and stabs that knight. A notification that he had failed the test of the 6th floor appears again. In the middle of PROTA's raid, a fort appeared on the road that made him slow down a bit. It was the skeletons that appeared even stronger on his way, and as a result, no matter which way PROTA went, the salts would still come and open the stone door. He wonders in frustration what he should do, for giving up is not an option. The PROTA manages to hold out for up to 13 days, but the knights did not appear, and when he ran out of options he could not continue. It was not about strength but lack of stamina. So before the skeletons reached the stone door by the other way, the PROTA had to go complete the phase, being the best option, but the most difficult. The PROTA thinks that whatever he does, he must concentrate on his growth, attack the skeletons, and he receives notifications that he has reached level 8 of resistance. He has reached level 4 of pain and level 9 of resistance to paralysis. Even his resistances have increased. After the knight condemns him to death, he receives a notification that he has leveled up, and in each of his virtues he has increased 1 point. He arrives at the waiting room, and after getting the ability of magic circuits, it became possible to use the magic power that was inside him. Although it had cost a lot to understand the changes that circulated in his body by the magic power. With hard work he got that power in his hands, but only in a small amount. He realized that if he sent the magic power to his muscles, he had access to explosive physical strength. Practicing several times, the PROTA managed to pass that magic power to his sword, and when he did that, it looked like a blue lightsaber. When that happened, the PROTA liked to call himself the Joseon Sword Master, but as the magic power could end, and he had to find some kind of method for that. Returning to battle with the skeletons, one of them exclaims to the servant of a false god, "Witness the strength of the great abyss. The unique and absolute being in that reality will bring salvation to that irrational world." The skeleton sees the Prota and tells him that he is brave but foolish, that he had taken the wrong path, and that Kijas would send him to his death. Stabs him and the Prota appears again in the waiting room lying on the floor with the notification that he had failed the 6th floor test. It goes back to the part of the story where the Prota is in a room where there is a capsule that protects a dragon egg. The Prota is finishing the grimoire of dragon use. He thinks about how crazy it is that dragons have not had a grimoire, because they are a magical race and they learn magic naturally as they grow. Plus they do not lose their memories no matter how much time passes. They never had the need for education or grimoires where to point and store all the magic. He complains out loud about how annoying a dragon race is and quickly clarifies to the draggy egg that he wasn't talking about him. He stares at him and thinks that, even though dragons don't need magical education, if he can teach him something, the dragon's learning will be faster. He thinks that he will have to teach him high-level magic required for the raid on the 61st floor, because there is no time for him to learn everything by himself in a natural way. The Prota thinks about the things he wrote in the Grimorium, because he had avoided putting things that a dragon wouldn't need. He filled the notebook with chants and internal magic power. He comes out of his thoughts when he gets a message from Park Yoonga, 90th floor, asking him about his report. He quickly writes her hell difficulty, 60th floor, residential district, all clear, and sends the message. He thinks about if there is any reason why every month he has to report like that and asks her if she is not tired of those reports. She asks him if he wasn't tired of her having to remind him every month. He tells her that he gets a message from her about it because he is always late, so he asks her the reason for her delays. He thinks that she is in a bad mood and that it will be better just to let that brush of words pass. The Prota apologizes to Park Yoonga and tells him that he just tries not to get too specific on how much time has been going on, and that he likewise tries not to look too much at the messages that come to him, as it seems he has been in there for a long time and feels he may become mentally ill again. He tells her that his medications are not working anymore, but it is all a lie. She apologizes to him and tells him that she did not know he felt that way. Tells him that he should not write her monthly reports anymore and will ask a certain person when she needs to hear from him. The Prota thinks that everything went as planned and it was time to get rid of another annoying thing. He asks Park Yoonga if he can pass her a message while he is firing Lee Yeonhee, as he will go to the 61st floor. She asks him what he will do there, and he tells her that he has been using too many points, so he should get more. She asks him what he wants her to tell her, and he proceeds to tell her. He asks her not to forget to tell the administrator and thinks of Kurikri. But Park Yoonga tells him that it would be better if that is something that comes out of his mouth. She asks him if the girl is not on the 60th floor, and he says yes. Park Yoonga tells him that the growth of the blue-haired girl and the bow had reached a safe point. He tells her that Lee Yeonhee managed to adapt well to the 6th floor and it was praise that she was worried about. He tells the Prota that it may take some time, but that girl would come to a discovery very soon. He tells her that that girl has talent, not as much as him, but she has. Park Yoonga tells her that to overcome the weakness of an archer, Lee Yeonhee learned from enchanting magic. Those abilities can be activated by giving magic power while saying some incantation like data spill Kion. It is not very powerful and not very modifiable, but it is easy to use and has a short casting time. Prota tells him that it is easy to learn as well. Originally it was called half-baked magic. However, things have gotten to the point where it is harder to find a traditional mage as opposed to an enchanter mage. Besides that, it is basically a fact that the archer-enchanter hybrid is powerful. Prota thinks internally that is why he had agreed and gave him his support. To change the subject, the Prota comments to Park Yoonga that he had heard that something was going to happen soon. He asks her how true it is and she tells him that, yes it is. He tells her that people have been talking about it. Although it is not something confirmed yet, she will have to look more into it. He comments that it would be good if it was a big conference day, as anything else would be upsetting. She tells him that if it is a big conference day she would not leave him alone. In an annoyed tone she tells him that the civilian militia has been slacking off a lot and he is shocked by what he hears. He tells her that she is killing them with so much nagging and the civilian militia guys had been complaining to him for several days now. She asks him about who and he writes down their names in a message he passes them. He thinks he is sorry but he can't afford to die. Park Yoonga tells her that Kim Min Hyuk was gone too, and the Prota tells her that now she will have to play the role of the mother for now too. She is dumbfounded by what she hears and tells him that she can't do that. The PROTA thinks about how he doesn't think they can replace Kim Min-hyuk because Park Young-a doesn't trust anyone anymore. He thinks about how he should stop him when he said he wanted a divorce, and she tells him that no one expected him to leave the moment he got that deal. They hang up the call, and the PROTA thinks about how ironic it is that the person giving dating advice was the same person who ended up in a divorce and leaving out of the game. The PROTA walks around the room a bit and thinks back to the grimoire, that what he had written down should be enough, but that anyway after the dragon hatches he should continue to find out more information about magic. He goes over to see the egg and wonders what color the dragon will be, as they used to be black, gold or red. He tells her to watch the house while he goes to get some money. He summons some guards to take care of the egg because that baby and the PROTA were the only ones on that floor and he didn't want to leave him alone. His clone appears and tells the PROTA that he is a main body bastard. He ignores him and gives him his task. The clone tells him that if he remembers that he is in a temporary residence and asks him to put him as the main body. The PROTA denies and thinks that even though that clone is created based on him, he was somewhat weak and malevolent. The clone reminds him that he can read his mind and asks him about who he was calling weak. The PROTA tells him that he will know if anything happens to the egg. The clone asks him not to take his existence lightly, but the PROTA ignores him and bids him farewell. The PROTA had created that clone to complete the 61st floor, but unfortunately he was unable to complete that floor and his clone had become useless. But he used it to guard his house.